I'm very sorry. I have just been talking to myself for the last 5 minutes. I always do this. So there's three things to do now in this OBS. I have to start stream, I have to click go live, and I have to unmute my microphone. Oh God! Thanks for sticking around. A couple of people there stuck around. Oh boy! I better just get on with it again anyway. And now I don't have an excellent connection anymore, but hopefully you're hearing me okay. My bit rate isn't so good and whatnot anymore. Gosh darn it. Anyway, I'm supping a mug of tea here, a cup of tea. I'll start with the comments that I see are already in the chat there. Vingal says, I never did notice the conch-like thing behind the fruit, whatever that is. Yeah, and as Carl Gustav says there, I believe it's called the cornucopia. I'll circle back to that, as the press secretary with the red hair used to say. Jenny was her name, was it? Anyway, A says, thank you for making it at this time. No problem, and sorry for being a little bit late. I said I was going to make it for around 12:30. Or, sorry, around midnight your time, but it's now 20 to 1. So sorry. I think I've been live roughly by about, or for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I didn't unmute my microphone. I was about to say it's so unprofessional of me, but then of course I'm not a professional. But I'd like to do things properly, like actually open the microphone. There's Doc Holiday as well. He says cheers, and Slow Boy Whiteboard says happy Friday to Doc Holiday. And Slow Boy says coming in clear. Thanks, Doc, to say 5x5. Well, I was 5x, or sorry, I'm only just 5x5 now. I'm really irritated with myself, but I better move on anyway. I'll read out the rest of the comments just to catch up, and then I'll get on with it. A says Mandela effect comes from the movie Cry Freedom, where Denzel Washington plays Steve Biko. Ah, so if we think that Mandela died in prison on Robben Island off the west coast of the Western Cape of Cape Town, we are confusing it. If we think that, we're confusing it with the fate of Steve Biko, who died in custody. That makes perfect sense. I think I'm going to have to make this a series, by the way, because I have an idea of where I want to get before I say goodbye to you at the end of this stream. And then I'll pick it up the next time, and I'll maybe start, examining things in more detail to do with Nelson Mandela. That's where I want to lead with this. So I just actually thought that this would be a nice segue into it, but this might take up the first stream. I'm always promising to do sequels to streams and never get around to it, but I'm going to do my best. So yeah, that makes really good sense. Cheers for that, eh? And he says still here, hi. So, oh damn it, I'm so embarrassed. Well, listen, if you can bear with me anyway, we'll get on with things now. Uh, yeah, right. I'll have to just get on with it. I'm so upset. Okay. What I was saying when I had muted myself was that the etymology, I remember looking into it before, the etymology of the corn in the cornucopia is that a corn is a horn, just like a ram's horn. I remember looking into it as far as there's two symbols in, what is it, astrology, the horoscopes things. There's two rams. One is a water ram, and the other is a Aries the ram. I can't remember what the water ram one is now. But anyway, their horn, I think their horn that they have on the side of their heads, the ram's horn, that's the horn of plenty as well. And right, well, that one worked there, Stephen. I'm just looking at the comments there now. I got distracted there. Cheers from Tennessee, he says once again. Cheers, Stephen. He says, cheers, everyone. I keep trying to comment, and I get an error saying undeliverable. Let me know if this works. Well, that one did work. My YouTube studio window says the audio stream's current bitrate is poor or something like that. Slowboy says Taurus. Cheers. Right, so it's Aries and Taurus. Okay. And there's a water. See, there's a water ram one as well. Maybe that's why I'm getting confused because, or maybe that's just an old Greek symbol that I'm misremembering or forgetting properly what it is to do with King Aegeus, who jumped into the water. I think that maybe he's the water ram then as well. Anyway, I'm not gonna distract myself with that. What I will what I will look up is the etymology for cornucopia because as far as I remember, the copia part means plenty, and it is the same word as copious. When we say something is copious, we mean it's plentiful or numerous or abundant. I was pretty sure when I first heard of a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, the Mandela effect that works for me or that I really believe in makes me, not works for me, makes me believe that it's a real phenomenon. And I'm forgetting now what I said while I was muted, but I'll say it again anyway. Is that either, the whole thing about the Mandela effect is that either people take this as proof that we're living in parallel universes that are coalescing, or that we're dipping in and out of different parallel universes, or we just have a collective misremembering for certain things. And maybe there's some sort of nefarious scheme behind it, or maybe it's a way of proving that the human memory is a curious thing, that it's not very reliable. I think we're probably aware of the experiments that did to show that eyewitness testimony is not a reliable thing, and that's why you need at least three witnesses. And if somebody has a more uh, sort of domineering character, they might subdue the other two people into believing they remember something they never saw. But either that gets us to believe in these, quite frankly, off the wall theories. Like, people should be laughed. These professors, these credential professors in these esteemed universities, come out with these string theories and quantum entanglements and parallel universes and all this sort of stuff. They should be laughed out of it, particularly if they themselves poo-poo the idea of God, or God creating the universe from a thought or a word or from a wave of his hand or from a will of his consciousness. The very same people who poo-poo that, dismiss that in a haughty, condescending way. And I don't even care whether anybody would believe in God or not, or consider themselves to be like, a learned agnostic or whatever, a fence sitter, or just somebody who genuinely says, "Look, I don't know." No matter what your position on it is there's a contradiction there, and I don't like these contradictions where these people say, "Oh, that's all nonsense," but let me give you these other ideas like string theory and parallel universes and all this sci-fi stuff, and call that science. These people should be laughed out of it. So equally, I hate these Reddit neckbeards who go on about, well, Occam's razor, I think you'll find, ha ha ha. But at the same time, for something like, they quote all this stuff like, great claims require great evidence or great proof, or, extravagant claims require extravagant proof. I can't stand that all these people repeat all these pithy phrases and they think they're so clever. They don't really understand science at all. They just want to be right. What I've discovered is everybody just wants to be right. They just want to put on the mantle of being right and go, ha ha ha, I think you'll find I was right. But there's no such thing as somebody being right. There is right or there is wrong. It's not about who's right, it's about what is right. That's something that's just been irritating me so much. And I keep talking to people who I find they are correct, but that's shorthand for meaning they speak the truth about something. But then there are these things that are so irrational, but they want to hold on to those irrational beliefs. Nobody seems to be rational. It's the easiest thing in the world to do if you just discard your sort of pet little ideas that you don't want anybody to come near. And so many people are right for the wrong reasons. They fluke being right about certain things, and you think, oh, these people, then they're going to be good people you can count on in a crisis, and you can't. But anyway, that's another thing. Uh, Quite another thing. Sorry for going off on that, but anyway, that's where I stand on these things. I cannot stand these supercilious, haughty, condescending experts who would laugh at something like the Mandela effect as well. and then sort of say, oh, but there is parallel universes and all this sort of stuff. But Mandela effect, oh, that's just people who are nonsense. I want to look into things without having a predisposed, prearranged idea in my head. Predetermined is the word I was looking for, idea in my head. I just want to look into it and find out what the truth might be. And there's a great many very fascinating so-called Mandela effects. And I think A has already given the best explanation there, that most people in Europe and America will have seen Steve Biko and confused him with Nelson Mandela. So easy to do when there's very few things that any of us are really informed about at all. But as I say, well, maybe I was muted while I said it. There's very few people in South Africa who think Nelson Mandela died when he was in jail and never became president. In as far as I remember, 1993, 94. But it was always a done deal. It was going to happen since 1990. Anyway, that's my little rant there. Um, A says hi again. No, well, that's before Slowboy said Taurus there. And Stephen says, I see your comments. And Doc and... No, Vingul says to Doc and to Slowboy, some kind of... Is it a smiley face that's sweating? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I'll get on with it here. The cornucopia one. I think that I said that I had plenty of Fruit of the Loom plain white t-shirts. And I was certain that it did have this corn in it, the fruit basket. Because where does the fruit come from without the basket? But it's a cornucopia. A corn is a horn, and the copiousness of the copia, the fruit of plenty. Ah, it's saluting, is it? Okay. It comes through slightly different looking through YouTube Studio, or maybe it's not YouTube Studio, it's YouTube web page, But then again, that could be because of my operating system or whatever updates, anyway. Appreciate that, Vingo. Now, I had gotten rid of a lot of my old t-shirts. That's what I figured, but I don't know. But I couldn't find any t-shirts with the basket or the corn or the horn of plenty on it. All of it was the lower one there, which I hope is on screen. The fruit of plenty, but without the basket of plenty. The plentiful fruit that you collect in autumn, And as far as I remember, maybe it's still there. The t-shirts that we all bought, I just really didn't even look into what kind of company it was. People had told me it was an Irish company, or at least they were made in Ireland. And I think maybe they said they were made in Ireland. And I think that there was a factory in Donegal. Maybe it's still there. So I figured, great. They're good value. I can buy them in bulk for a cheap price, and they last long, and that's great. But I guess I must have thrown out, whichever ones started becoming raggedy or weren't good white anymore, was throwing them out. And I couldn't find any of my t-shirts that had the old symbol on it. So I thought, right, that is weird, because I was absolutely certain. So I won't say his name because I'm not sure that he wants them to, or I'm not sure that he wants me to say his name, even if it's just his screen name. If I see him in the chat and he says that he has no problem with that, then I will. But there's a fella anyway who often sends me very interesting items of interest, I suppose. And this was one of them. It was the explanation for the, seemingly to me anyway, bizarre disappearance or misremembering on my part of this horn of plenty. Slowboy said, I never bought Fruit of the Loom products, but I did actually think the old logo had a cornucopia and they changed it. But then again, in the 80s, it was a commonly used icon. Yeah. And look, I mean, a lot of the t-shirts that I would have bought, like it would have been in the 1990s or the 2000s or the 2010s, I even thought. But as far as I know now, it's an American company. And I think they might have shut down some of their manufacturing plants in the US. And Donegal is a place that traditionally would not have had a lot of industry in Ireland. It's in the very northwest, still part of the Republic of Ireland, but it's not a part of the political union known as Northern Ireland. So it's a strange thing, and a lot of people would commute daily into Northern Ireland from Donegal because there's not much there as far as industry. So it would have been probably a welcome thing then for a textile industry to open in Donegal. But that would have been, of course, these international corporations closing down in the US because they say, oh, it's too expensive to operate in the US, open up a factory in Ireland. And then everyone in Ireland doesn't complain. They don't worry about the factory or job losses, the factory closing or job losses in the United States. They just go, oh, great, here's an American company opening up in Ireland. But as I watched happening, from American companies opening up, let's say in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, then they started closing down in the 2000s and 2010s and moving to Eastern Europe or India, you know. And then all of a sudden you have the Irish or the Europeans starting to go, oh, wait, that's not fair, you know. But my attitude is, if it's wrong anywhere, then it's wrong everywhere. Just in the same way as an injustice done to anybody anywhere is an injustice done to everyone everywhere. Anyway, I won't get bogged down in asides if I can help it. Stephen said, I thought it had the cornucopia too. Right, I'll start moving the picture there. Hopefully, I did put that on screen properly and you can see what's on screen there. This is, so I'll just go through these and I haven't got them in perhaps the right order that I'd like, but I'll read this out here. It says, this is somebody who's, what you called, verified on Twitter. He's saying, this is the only Mandela effect that I've never read a good explanation for. I know what I saw, he says. And I felt certain of it as well. But listen, we're all capable of being gaslit. And if everybody was telling me, which I guess they were, that I'm just misremembering it, then I kind of had to just say, well, listen, I don't know. I guess I'll leave it for now. There's no point in wasting any more energy on it. Maybe the answer will come to me or something as I walk through life, as I travel around the world. Maybe I'll discover something. Or I used to, I still find, but there was a period as I went through my life, maybe in my 30s and on into my 40s, I began to find that a lot of the answers of the universe were coming to me as I traveled around. I sort of felt like I would meet it halfway, you know. Vingol says, it does look a bit naked without it, I must admit, seeing them side by side. And that's exactly how I feel about it. To me, when I see the harvest being collected, I sort of say, well, how did you collect it without the wicker basket? Which, to me, I consider the Horn of Plenty to be interchangeable with. Like, nobody collects or harvests the fruit of autumn into their bare hands. They harvest it into a woven basket, and people would weave horns of plenty like that because it's easy to weave stuff starting in a circle and then you close off the basket, as it were, and then you can hold it in one hand in that natural shape. It probably takes more skill to weave a basket with a separate handle, and then stitch them together and things like that. So probably would be an easy way, like an evolution of the basket. It was probably the first iteration of the Horn of Plenty. A says, I reckon I've seen that image with government advertising to eat all 5 food groups in a pyramid. Maybe. I think there's somewhere that lists out what the various fruits are there, but obviously, well, I'm going to say what it looks like to me is there's red grapes and green grapes and an apple there. Anyway, that's that tweet there is from 28th of June 2023. So less than a year ago, and it had 2.5 million views. So clearly people are very interested in this. And as I say, there's a fella, who you recognize if you came into the chat. He would have sent, either this picture or something like this, and a link to other people discussing on it. And so if you go to, I'm going to read shortly from Know Your Meme. Like, this is a meme as well. A meme is an idea that goes around. Some people say meme, but it's meme, I'm pretty sure. But there is what looks to be categorical proof. It's got a because it's not just a picture of something where you'd sort of say, "Oh, well, that's photoshopped or that's an AI image." To me, that looks legitimate, and it's a different market there. Maybe it's Canadian, maybe it's French. Um, I'm trying to guess what that is. Something Aquete, something Aket. I should have looked this up earlier, but what is it? Oh, chaussette maybe, or a chaussette in French is a sock. That's kind of what it looks like, but maybe it's along those lines anyway. It's a pair of three something ets, something akets, and I don't think that's a doctored photograph. I think that's somebody finding it in some kind of maybe it's old stock. I mean the label looks that it's tarnished a bit. Um, that looks like a legitimate picture to me, and it's a pack of three of these. Oh, is it packet? Paquete. Right, just a packet of three. Okay, cheers, Vingul. Um, Vingul says unrelated, but anyone else sometimes go on nine? Can we even say that on YouTube? Nine/11 video sprees. Been watching tons of videos in the last few days. What an incident! Well, listen, I mean, it's worth revisiting, I suppose. Is it how many years are we now? 23 years, I guess. I tell you what. I'll just say this in response to that. Um, it did occur to me. Obviously, I've never forgotten about that. I remember where I was when it happened. It was. I'm going to say it was Generation X's JFK incident, where everybody remembers where they were, and nothing has ever been the same, and nothing's been resolved about it. And that's a big thing in common with JFK. Nothing has been resolved about it, and nobody has been brought to justice about it or for it. No accountability. And like, please, I don't think anybody here is going to say, "Oh yeah, no, they got Osama." Like, that's. I don't even think he had anything to do with it. But there's a whole generation, perhaps Generation Y, who were too young to really remember it, and millennials who really don't remember it, and Gen Z. Gen Z weren't were pretty much born either. They were maybe Gen Z is born in the year 1999 onwards, or 2000 or 2001. But I don't know what they think about it. It's just something in history. It doesn't affect them probably. Probably the same as way as I thought all about history. But yeah, maybe we'll look into it then. We'll revisit it and see what you all have to say about that and think about that next time. So yeah, paquet means pack or package in Spanish. Well, sounds like that's what it means in French to me as well. So yeah, okay. Um, I guess that's what it means there. A packet of three. Um, three pairs in a pack. Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, you're saying you can ignore that if you like. It's off topic. I know. Anyway, I'll get back on topic here now. Anyway, so he says I haven't dived into the conspiracies of recently, just raw footage and documentaries. Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I just figure like at the stage, I'll get back on topic now in a second, and just to say, you've probably all heard of Quantum of Conscience. Like his attitude to it is that like, I mean, we'll never know, and like it's just something that's put there to distract us all. And I don't think there's an. I can accept that there might be certain supernatural things going on in the world, but look, I better not get this stream taken offline because, of course, I think you can talk about this. I think you're probably not allowed to talk about this stuff on YouTube, right? I'll wait till the next time we'll talk about it properly. But my attitude is that at this stage, well, I can't really say. I just want justice for everything, and I'm beyond tired of everything, beyond tired of nothing ever changing and nobody really caring about anything. Um, Slowboy says, I worked at a gas station where we had Chinese batteries that were called Duracell, but they had the Energizer pink bunny with the drum as the logo. After Energizer won a court case, we had to take them off the shelf, and we weren't able to sell them anymore. I guess it was a copyright infringement lawsuit. My point is maybe the brand logo was stolen and they put that picture on it for plausible deniability, that it wasn't the same product or trying to steal the logo. Well, look, it's another example of the Mandela effect. I'll just say, from my understanding, what I saw, like I saw Duracell become Energizer over here. And like regional variations in how brands change their logos and change their name. I maybe didn't look into why they did it, but brands or corporations sometimes merge and take over brands and this kind of thing. I saw Duracell over this side of the Atlantic gradually be rebranded as Energizer. So, in my memory, we had the Duracell bunny on TV, on adverts for a long time, and then he just became the Energizer bunny. And I've worked in a store before where we had a rebrand of something and we were told like, oh, on midnight you have to take down all the branding for this and put up the branding for that, because they just wanted to, like corporate had it in their heads that they wanted to have a clear cut off point, and they wanted to, you know, have no no time where there was two brands side by side with the same kind of logos and all that, you know. So I have a feeling that that's what happened with Energizer, Duracell to Energizer, that it wasn't one guy or one company ripping the other one off. But again, she's maybe we should look into that. I'll save it for a bit later, right? But there you go. I mean, look, to me, that's concrete proof about the Fruit of the Loom one, that it was there. But Nick Hinton is saying here on Twitter, I don't know who he is, but he's saying in 2019, 4th of October 2019, the Fruit of the Loom logo has never had a cornucopia in the background. This is another mind-bending Mandela effect. The real logo just doesn't feel right to me. And yeah, so I think a lot of the time we're being gaslit. And people would say, well, how could that be? Like, that would require a corporation to lie to us. Like, as though that is impossible, as though it doesn't happen all the time. Corporations lie all the time because corporations are people. And we would think, well, they wouldn't have the audacity to lie about something as big as that. Oh no, we never had that as our logo. Because surely they'd be found out. It would require loads of people to operate in conjunction together, to conspire together. Yeah, that's what people do. You know, isn't it amazing that so many of our fellow citizens, fellow what am I trying to say? Fellow people, right? Our own people. They find it so implausible that people would lie. But maybe, as you're familiar with, let's see if I can read this out, right? I just I often come back to this, right? And let's see if I can read this out, right? Because I can never quite commit to memory just the quote, because it's written so well. You know how basically people would accept that people will lie about what they consider to be small things, but they don't think that people would have the audacity, the chutzpah, to lie about the big things. No, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, that's the way it is. It galls me. It irritates me to no end that people kind of that would record. Well, you don't believe in NASA? You think all those people in NASA would just lie or whatever, you know? Um. So Slowboy says about Duracell, my point is that maybe the brand logo was stolen, and they put that picture on it for plausible deniability, that it wasn't the same product. They're trying to steal the logo. Yeah, maybe. Stephen says, I've been in the metalworking industry since around 2002, and absolutely everything claimed about the cause of the subsequent total global failure of all connection points is impossible. Oh, right, yes, okay. We're still talking about towers collapsing into their own footprint. Yeah, obviously it's nonsense. And yet, like, I tell you what, maybe to put a finer point on it, right? I guess what I care more about now is that most of our own people either don't know or don't care, or they just kind of go, let's just move on, what's done is done, and they kind of know but they don't care to keep bringing up this sort of thing, just like everything like World War II and everything else, and were certain chambers really real or not. They just kind of go, listen, let's just pretend they're real and move on and just earn another paycheck and forget about what's done is done and let sleeping dogs lie. You see, that's what I'm convinced of, that most people know, but they spend their whole lives pretending not to know and getting angry with you if you keep saying to them, but it doesn't make sense. They know it doesn't make sense, which is why they get so angry. Do you know what I mean? And so in the end, I guess ultimately it's no longer that I want to get to the bottom of these mysteries. The main mystery for me is, how can people be so willfully deluded? And I guess the answer is because most people don't care about truth or justice. They just like to pretend that they do, while basically doing whatever it takes to earn as much money as they can at the expense. They know it's at the expense of everybody else. They'll talk about, oh no, we'll just make a bigger pie and everyone can have a bigger slice of the same pie. No, no. They want to have your slice of the pie, and that's it. And they don't care about truth or justice. Meanwhile, they virtue signal about how they love everybody and they just want justice in the world and they want freedom for everyone. And they don't care about these concepts. You know? To me, the greatest mystery is how people can be such hypocrites and still live with themselves. But I guess they're on a very fine line, which is why they get so angry. They think it's an existential threat if you start bringing the truth too close to them and saying, acknowledge it. Um, Stephen says, steel and concrete, not to move or act in the fashion they moved in that video because of heat. Um, when you said, I just want justice for everything, then people judge God for destroying evil. His judgment is perfect. Um, right. Well, I don't think you're talking about me sort of saying, I don't think you're trying to sort of say I'm being a hypocrite by saying, I just want justice for everything. But maybe you are. I don't know. But like, I will admit that I don't fancy waiting around for justice until the afterlife. I know that's not, for many reasons, that's the thing you shouldn't say on YouTube or anywhere else, you know. But I just, that to me, that's like, and maybe you'll all switch off now, like, but I mean, that's, people say justice is for God and God alone and that kind of thing. The injury has been done to me, and I am not. So therefore, the injury is constant. It's everybody lying all around me, and have done, and everyone's lied to me for my whole life, and I assert my right to be extremely upset about that. That's what I'll say to that. Okay. Slowboy says, "No, I won't talk. I wasn't talking about you when mentioning God's justice." Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But I will admit to you, like that, if God will say, "No, leave it to me. Justice is mine and mine alone," I don't agree with that. That's so we are going to differ. I'm going to be very honest, with you about that. Um, and even if all of this is a test and yada yada, I don't know, I'll say yada yada. Even if all this is a test, and I would say the test has to be for me. I can't know that it's a test for sure. You have to be seen to basically stick to your principles no matter what, especially when you're not thanked for it in this world. Um, well, I'm just tired of it all, right? I'm sick to death of it all. And I don't want to wait a nanosecond longer, even though I can accept that timelines move differently and afterworlds and whatever. But I'm tired of it all, beyond tired of it all. But I'll get back on topic here anyway. Um, Vingo says, I think the logo on the right just looks... Oh, no, sorry. Energizer battery with arms and legs keeps on going, yeah. Stephen says, I wonder, I'm convinced there were some major shenanigans that day, but the way the top of the first tower to fall topples over... Oh, listen, look, as I say, yeah, I totally agree with you. But anyway, A says, I never heard of that brand, but the left image seems familiar. Oh, okay. So look, it's very possible that in Australia you didn't have the fruit of the loom. Because I mean, in lots of markets, you would have barriers to entry, where maybe you had your own textile industry in Australia, and there was a huge textile industry in South Africa all throughout the 70s and the 80s, until basically the end of, well, Afrikaner rule there. And in 1990 and 1994, then Nelson Mandela came in. That was pretty much the end of the textile industry, and then the you-know-who's moved it over to Southeast Asia or Asia, or wherever, Indonesia, those kind of places. But it provided a lot of work for the, what would you call them? What's a euphemism? The the underprivileged or whatever they'd like to call themselves. You know, that sort of way. So there certainly wasn't positive effects. A lot of people there in South Africa. Uh, in fact, most people of no matter what color, race, or creed will say to you there that things were better before 1990 or 1994. Um, so it's very possible anyway that certain brands didn't exist. Vingel says if I delve into the more rabbit hole type vids, I might change my mind again though. Slowboy says they only care about truth and justice when they are the victims. Yeah, yeah. Vingo says the top could absolutely topple over, but the lower 75 to 80 floors. Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, of course, like, no way. Um, and, just talking about destroyed by the top without causal interaction, it would decelerate. Vingo says, I see. I'd think the weight would be enough to make it domino. All right, well, listen, I'll stop with the whole 9 and then not 10, but 11, until a little bit later. Or until another stream. Right, we'll do another one. If I don't ever get distracted with something else then. But anyway, so I'll have a better one of that, I think. I'll come back to that in a minute, the logos throughout time. Here's somebody who wrote an article. Alex Kasprak says on July 5th, 2023, despite strong assertions to the contrary, the company has denied ever using this ancient symbol of abundance. So that's when the fruit of the loom has been questioned about the cornucopia. So there they are side by side again there. And Vingel says, yeah, just ignore these comments. I'll just chat going on in it. Yeah, I know, yeah. Right, now there's some other proof, I would say. There's somebody's very legitimate looking thumb. They've even chewed their fingernails. And while it's not a perfect representation of the logo, it is either stitched or printed into the back of that t-shirt. So it's not on a label, rather it's printed or stitched into it. White thread on black or white printing on black. And so very clearly there, anyway, we can see that it says Fruit of the Loom, 2XL size. It looks very legit, like again, 2EG, whatever other market that's supposed to be an extra grand, I suppose, for French. So maybe it's Canadian or France or somewhere else in the world. And it's Felix, might as well call him out there, at it's at Scythe Myth. And he says, F. Nelson Mandela, the truth is out there. Right, and that has 6.6 million views. That's on June 30th, 2023. So there's the Fruit of the Loom logos, allegedly, as they were throughout time. But my memory is of the logo beyond 1978. Like, my memory is in the 80s, 90s, and whatever. So all we have is there from 1893 up to 1978. Then we have a jump to the current year. So what about, but from the 80s and 90s? I'm gonna say maybe that's where 80s, 90s, and 2000s. That's when it did have the horn of plenty behind the plenty. So we have 1893, 1927, 1936, 1951, 1962. 1978. I will say 1962 and 1978 do look familiar to me as well, but maybe different clothes had maybe they had alternative logos. Maybe they had certain different items of clothing that might have had various logos on them. Maybe they had a range of them on it. So Steven says, okay, my bad. I'll stay on topic now. Okay, well, whatever. I don't mind, of course. Doc says, I absolutely remember the cornucopia. And Slowboy says, Photoshop is so tricky now. These kind of proofs don't sway me one way or the other anymore. Photographic evidence is no longer evidence. Post-trutherisms. I mean, I do accept what you're saying there, Slowboy. But going back to this, what the kind of things that make things look very genuine for me is when somebody's fingernails have been chewed and their hands are a bit dirty. I kind of go, that takes an extra effort of, I suppose, what's the word for it? Deceptiveness, dastardly deceptiveness. And even that there's a bit of hair in the neck of the t-shirt there, and that it's a bit frayed around it as well. Like it looks worn. No, I know you could start with that and then put it in there, but it just, I guess, hopefully what I'm saying is, although I don't feel I've expressed it well, what I'm saying is that if somebody is faking it, that's a really excellent fake, and it's not just from a point of view of being skilled at Photoshop. It's that there are elements to the photograph that create a sort of an authenticity to it for me, you know. Um, Now, Erastus Turnipseed says, sadly, I worked in advertising, assistant creative director, or assistant to the creative director. No, that sounds like a job that's going to have, what do you call it, a lot of credo or credentials like to do with this kind of thing. And he says, or a lot of weight to it, you know, when speaking on this sort of topic. He says, briefly, he says, I worked in this advertising assistant creative director briefly, and we updated corporate logos frequently. Right. Okay. Well, that assists or helps the kind of case where, as I say, if we go from 1971 all the way up to current date, uh, that there's a lot of room in there for alternative logos. So Slowboy says, oh no, Slowboy says, I think, did I read this out? Every brand has a cheaper version they sell, made at the same factories. Yes, the outlet stores is some version of it, but then the outlet stores kind of turned into boutique destination stores anyway. Vingul says someone should print that onto an old T-shirt and take a genuine photo too. Sorry, someone could print that onto an old T-shirt and take a genuine photo too. Um, yes, they could. So we could be looking at a non-photoshopped, so legitimate photograph, but somebody has done it old school, like the Piltdown Man or something like that, or faking fossils, that they have faked the fossil and then taken a photograph of it, or then buried it and allowed it to be discovered. Sure, sure, yeah. Um, and Vingul says he's showing his dirty fingernails. I trust him in quotation marks, and then a smiley that says falling over laughing. I'll say it then in this way. One of the ways that I mean, I contemplate everything, no matter how out there the theory is, and I don't. I remind myself not to bother getting embarrassed. I reserve the right to investigate in my mind or empirically or any other way any idea and churn it over in my mind. It was I think it was one of those philosophers that either Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle. I think it was one of those guys that talked about, a mind. I can't remember what kind of quality he said, but something to do with, the quality of a healthy mind is to be able to take any idea and examine it without becoming consumed with that idea. But even people who say didn't take the thing in 2020 and don't believe the government for most things and don't, are have a skepticism of corporations and all this sort of stuff, I have found that you talk to them, you don't have to talk to them for very long, and all of a sudden, if you bring up these other ideas, even if I'm not saying, oh, I think this is true or whatever, I just say, well, what do you think of this? Then they start with their well, anyone who thinks that must be an idiot and all this kind of thing. And then, you ask them, like, okay, well, for example, not that I'm going to say which I think is true or anything like this, right? But another one of these things that we've all probably come across is the flat Earth versus round Earth versus whatever version of Earth you want, right? And I found that to be very interesting, that whole thing. And I found a lot of the things that people who were serious about, like taking out measurements for things, laser lines and, telescopes, or sorry, cameras with telescopic attachments and seeing how far they could zoom in over the horizon and how far they could see all this sort of stuff. And actually doing measurements, I've found that a lot of people who laugh at that sort of stuff and kind of go, oh, these people who think the Earth is flat, I'm kind of going, well, listen, I'm not sure if they're actually saying that, but they're saying there are some anomalous readings they're getting. These people, they hold their bellies and they go, oh, those people must be idiots. And then you talk to them and you sort of say, well, but are you familiar with this concept? Do you know about this? Have you heard of the P9000 zoom or whatever it is? And they kind of go, no, but I don't need to know, and this sort of stuff. And then, they haven't looked into it in the slightest. And these same people who might have looked into one or two things, they still have that mental attitude that, oh, well, I'm just right, because I'm a clever person. And they end up falling into the same trap of basically pride before a fall when it comes to assuming that they know what's right about something. Now, I'm not saying that to contradict you, but I'm sort of saying, like, this is what I'm trying to get at, the idea of somebody having an open mind. I'm not trying to convince you that this is proof, but I'm saying, to me, uh, when I see something like that, I say that that has the hallmarks of something that has an authenticity to it. And sure, they could have faked the T-shirt and printed that part on it afterwards. It would be a very good looking fake if it was just a standard black T-shirt and they put the fruit of the loom and the print and that kind of thing on it. But one of the ideas that I have often considered is that, are we living in whatever? And of course, you'd have to get into the definition of what each individual thinks constitutes a virtual reality of sorts, right? Because if people do believe in an afterlife in a religious way, then somebody else could interpret that as this world then being a virtual reality, or a training ground, or um, a holding reality for us, or a incorporated, or in corpus reality, where we are made manifest into a organic being, but but that are really souls. But that's completely analogous to somebody saying, well, I am me, but my character or my avatar in a video game is that. So people can be talking about the same thing but think they're not. But it depends on their perspective. Well, one of the things that I've thought about is, okay, if this is a computer reality, and I'm not even getting as far as Elon Musk saying, oh yeah, well, it just is with really good hardware, where it's like a Nvidia GTX 7 million or whatever it might be. I'm not talking about that, but I'm sort of saying that, just from the point of view of our own mind and what it requires to make us believe that we're in a virtual reality, what would it take? Well, for me, if I was living in a virtual reality, if this was faked to the extent that there was nothing real about it, and again, you'd have to then get down to brass tacks and say, well, what defines real? What is real? What is reality? Well, one of the things I've done is I have looked at myself in the mirror sometimes and contemplated these ideas of, like, basically existence. Who am I? Who are you? What is the nature of existence? What is reality? What is virtual reality? And I look in the mirror and I kind of go, oh no, my face doesn't look right, or I have a pimple on my forehead or on my nose or something like this. And I kind of say, well, if this was a virtual reality, they would have to have gone to the effort of creating not just a pimple on my nose, but now that I see it, it hurts a bit. They would have had to have gone to the effort of creating all these blemishes and imperfections, not just on my face, but in the world. And that really takes some extra effort to go to. And that implies a lot of things. Anyway, look, that's very far to go, but that's why when I see here something like what looks like maybe a little bit of dog hair or shaving hair, maybe if he's going grey, or maybe he got a haircut and there's some trimmings from his neck that he got a haircut on this T-shirt that he's trying to show people, or that I can see that it's frayed on the T-shirt. To me, those are hallmarks of authenticity, when there are imperfections like that in something. And that is a principle that I believe can be applied, not just in T-shirts, not just in pimples on noses, but if I'm in a dream, if I'm having a dream, and it hasn't happened lately, but when I was a kid, it happened a lot of the time, I'd be sort of saying, okay, well, the situation that I'm in is getting quite preposterous now. And that would be one of the things that would wake me up to, sort of say, oh, I'm dreaming. But there are other things where I'd sort of say, yeah, well, in my dream worlds, I tend not to have blemishes. Everybody imagines themselves to be perfect in a virtual reality. And that's one of the hallmarks of when things aren't authentic, when everything's perfect. Long way to go to get there. But look, maybe that's the point of these live streams, where I can't say, oh, that's all too incoherent, right? I won't bother putting that out. This is, I guess, the point of it. Maybe that I think that I'm going to go in a certain direction, and then I end up saying a lot of stuff that some people could mock me for, but I have to remember to sort of say I don't care, right? As long as I'm just sort of getting something out there. I was here. I'd said some stuff, and then I wasn't here. That'll do. But anyway, that's my sort of friendly rebuttal to people saying, "Oh well, you shouldn't just think that's some element of legitimate proof when I look at that." To me, I'm going to say, like, being honest, when I see that as more likely to be legitimate, authentic proof of the logo having existed than not. Now, I'll take a break there and just have a quick look at some of the comments there. Um, I see there's been a few, actually. Uh, Now, Slowboy says, "Oh no, so I'll start from here again. Every brand has a cheaper version they sell, made at the same factories." And Vingo said someone could print that same logo, so that's where I left off. Doc says, "I have a bunch of old T-shirts." This is Jack. "I'll look through them and I'll find the old logo. You can be guaranteed that I won't Photoshop the finding." Well, please do, Doc. Please go and find some of your old T-shirts. I have said to myself that, look, I must have some old ones lying around in a plastic bag somewhere in a loft that I sort of said I'll use those for polishing the car with someday, right? Um, so I have a feeling that I must have some as well, and I'll have a look after this as well, right? And maybe come back to you next week and let you know. So that's what we'll both do then, right? And of course, nobody knows me personally, but I wouldn't lie to you about anything. I don't think. Right? I had to check. I don't think that's hardly much of a guarantee, but I don't think I would lie to you about anything. Um, why would I? But then again, look, everybody says that, so who cares, right? But if I find something, I'll see what I'll see, or you'll see what we'll see. Um, Vingo says, "I have 2 to 3 old Loom T-shirts too. Well, break them out and take a photograph if you can." Vingo says, "Just banter, mate," to me. And I guess, no, but look, maybe I don't want to sound like, I hope I didn't sound like I was too serious putting my counterpoint as far as that goes. But it's all in the form of discussion as well. I haven't taken any umbrage at all. Julius A says, "Julius Caesar, King Edward, Louis of France, Tsar Nicholas, JFK, Gaddafi, Mustache Man, and Napoleon. What is the common theme?" um, yes, I guess there is a common theme, but I guess I'll say this, that there's a certain group of people that didn't like it. Well, I guess that's that's all it is. He was the enemy of. They were all the enemies of a certain common group of people. And Lincoln too. Really? Okay. I keep hearing conflicting things, or I keep reading conflicting things about Abe Lincoln. Um, Not Banker Boys. All got the chop. Nothing new under the sun. Yes. Can't go again. Aye, well, we're on the same page there. Uh, Carl Gustav says the Jaws, or yes, this is one for me, right? So in James Bond movie, uh, the Jaws and Dolly scene, was that her name, from Moonraker, is the only one that really bothers me. Yeah, in my mind, she had braces, and so did he. He had metal teeth, and she had braces, or maybe did they get stuck together because of the braces? In my mind, anyway, she had braces and he had metal teeth, and he was embarrassed about his teeth and didn't want to smile. But he when he saw that she had metal teeth, or she smiled back at him with her braces rather, then that was a thing where they both kind of went, "Oh, we're the same. We have a commonality. We have a common humanity," sort of thing. And that's what I distinctly remember. But then people say, "Nope, she didn't. She didn't have braces on her teeth." That's a misremembering. But then the scene doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's something that still bothers me as well, big time as well. Carl Gustav, that's a great one. God, I should have had a few of them prepared. I should have known this would require other ones. But yeah, I really appreciate that, Carl Gustav. That's a great one, because for me, I was certain that, like, there's no way it couldn't be that she didn't have train track braces, because the scene where they basically connect like that and kind of go, oh, right, great. Like you're a big destructive giant, and you're a timid little girl, but we now have a shared commonality. We have a connection. The scene doesn't work unless she has braces. As Carl Gustav says there, right? The scene doesn't make sense otherwise. It doesn't. Right? Perfect. Spot on. So look, we'll have to do a follow. I can't get into it now, really. I don't think, but we'll have to do a follow up because it'll take time for me to kind of peruse that. We'll have to do a follow up next week. Maybe we'll start next week with that, or next time rather. So it's from Moonraker anyway, and A says even if you've got an apron. Carl Gustav says I know I'm real at least, although we may all be brains in jars. Yeah, look, I've even wondered whether I'm real or not as well, but anyway, I guess that's what you have to wonder about if you're contemplating the nature of existence. How do I know I'm me? Oh, yeah, it's solipsism and all that. You start from yourself and you work your way out where it's very tentatively. Um, Erastus then says, college grad student with Adobe Premiere. Oh, with regard to, Photoshops. Um, but look, there used to be this joke on 4chan, I guess, or maybe it was Reddit, where people would say, how do you know that's fake? And people would say, well, I know from, looking at the pixels. And so I don't think that's Photoshop. And I do think that I have become better able to spot a Photoshop or, a manipulated image since I have become a bit better at using kind of Photoshop type programs or packages or applications and noticing where I start to get lazy in blending things in or whatever. But anyway, it could be. Like, I'm not saying that it isn't, but I'm saying that photograph passes the test of authenticity for me. And I'm prepared to be wrong about it, of course, prepared to be proven wrong. Uh, oh, and Carl says, but for what purpose would somebody, I guess, fake the image? And look, I mean, why does anybody do anything? For devilment. People love creating confusion or chaos as well. Most people are pieces of SH1T, and they don't really have reasons for doing anything anyway. Erastus says, tomfoolery, psyop, general FUK or ERY? I don't know. Yeah. Right, I'm caught up there in the comments, and I'll get on to something else that I wanted to read out here. I guess I'm not sure which order this is supposed to go in. 4:14:24. I might have read the date, and that's 10:47, and this is 10:46. Right, I'll start here. So Anonymous on 4chan says, and maybe I'll read this into the record. Hopefully that's on screen though. 464926589, and I see this coming up on screen here. Erastus Turnipseed says, believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear. I really like that quote, and I'll just say I don't know who said it originally. I guess maybe it's lost in the midst of time. I'm guessing nobody knows exactly who came up with it, but a person who used it as his tagline was a fellow in an English sort of conspiracy theory investigator. God, his first name was Richard. Why have I forgotten his name? Damn it, it'll come to me now. I was hoping his name would come to me when I had finished the sentence. But anyway, he's a Welsh guy, British guy. Maybe he's not exactly Welsh, but he lived in Wales for a while. Maybe he's from North England. But I used to listen to him a lot, and he's very good. But I have a feeling that the you-know-whos are doing a malicious court case against him and have been for quite a while. Oh, did Edgar Allan Poe come up with that? Okay, maybe so. Says Erastus Turnipseed. Right, cheers. Anyway, I'll read this out what's on screen here. And this guy says, oh, damn it, I forgot this thread even existed. It's kind of a meme, but what the artist basically concluded was that back in the day, Fruit of the Loom had a huge settlement against them for dumping chemical runoff from their clothes dye and poisoning a couple of 100,000 people. Um, and Vingo says Poe with a fire icon, so he must really appreciate him. And then he says, using Eskimo tricks and schemes, by changing the trademark logo, it allowed the old Fruit of the Loom to declare bankruptcy, to pay less of the settlement, but also a new Fruit of the Loom to exist, while basically changing absolutely nothing. Now, I will say, in the interests of impartiality, being unbiased, I haven't, not that I've looked up and down and all around the internet, but I haven't found any corroboration of that. I haven't found anything that I would sort of say, yes, that is proven to my satisfaction to have been something that did indeed happen. But from the way that I know that they operate, that sounds extremely plausible to me. And oftentimes the reason for closing down a factory or relocating, say, let's suppose that there was somewhere in, I don't know, where did he say? Don't think he said there where it was, but supposing there was some state in the US that had closed down and opened a cheaper one up in Donegal in Ireland. It could also be that they were saying, "Oh, that factory is gone now. The pollution there is gone. Blah de blah de blah." So just looking at the comments there, and Doc Holliday there says Poe is awesome, and Carl Gustav says, "Lol." So will Kentucky Fried Chicken or KFC be a Mandela effect in the future? Yeah, probably, probably. And I also, I think as well, like, I mean, although of course can't prove it, that they wanted to get rid of the word chicken because they thought KFC, then they can't get sued if they put anything other than real chicken in it. Yeah, why not? Keeping their options open. That, again, to me, that sounds plausible. I wouldn't dismiss that. Dr. Crispy John Rothschild, I keep nearly using his maiden name there. He says Buncrana, so that's, I guess he's being specific about where it was. I better just check, but I think Buncrana is in Donegal. Um, yeah, okay. So I guess he's been specific about where the Fruit of the Loom was. So anyway, that sounds plausible to me. Why they might shut down and then have a different logo and even say it was a different person. Sorry, a different corporation. Vingo says Colonel Sanders always looked like Norm Macdonald playing Colonel Sanders. Yeah, I remember he did that skit, that quote, or that. Yeah, it was a skit. I did appreciate that. All right. Um. Okay, and next thing anyway from 4chan, this guy says, and is it the same guy? You can tell by this little ID that they give people. Yeah, same guy. PN capital N EX SM. Sorry, SVM. He says, some autist on TikTok exposed the SH1T out of them. She found a ton of the old trademarks and shirts with the cornucopia and put the old logo on merch, trying to force them to sue her so they'd address it. And they threw a temper tantrum trying to get her deplatformed. Really? Okay. Again, look, I don't know where this temper tantrum is. Maybe it's easy to find. I don't know. I'll have to come back next time with the update if it's there. In response to that, anyway, I like this kind of, it's, I guess you could call it a culture, an online culture, not just a 4chan culture, where this guy says based timeline rescuer. I like that. Um, Doc Holliday says about the girl in the Moonraker episode who fell in love with Jaws. He agrees that she 100% had braces. And Vingel says, yeah, it's eons or aeons since I watched Moonraker, but she looks weird without braces. Doesn't make any sense. Then all she's got left is her pigtails. But now I guess people are going to say, oh no, she never had pigtails. Erastus Turnipseed says, autist waffen. I love it. I love it. That's brilliant. And here's me thinking I'd never laugh again. Um, that's class. All right, so here's from Wiki User. I don't know this site, I don't think. Um, more answers. Maybe it's I can't remember the name of that site where people go to Quora. Maybe it's from Quora. I don't know. Anyway, the human characters in the Fruit of the Loom commercials are the apple, the purple grape, the green grape, and the leaf. The classic Fruit of the Loom cornucopia, Horn of Plenty, includes an apple, purple grapes, green grapes, currants, and leaves. Okay, well, aren't currants dried grapes anyway? I think. Not sure. I was confused. I was with sultanas. Oh, I like that artist waffen. Can we get a Wehrmacht something into it as well? Jeez. Anyway, I'm nearly forgetting where I am. This guy, so Frank Weiss, which is an interesting name. Weiss means white, as far as I understand it. And he's called this album "Flute of the Loom." And what we're looking at here is a computer generated image, but it's an image from the Ant Bully, the movie, the Ant Bully. So they saw fit to create the logo in their movie on whatever piece of textiles or clothing this is, but it says size something or other, and it says 100% cotton. Now, people might say, why would they go to the bother of having such a minute detail like that? Just knowing that people would zoom in, artists would zoom in, members of the artist waffen would zoom in, um, in their Messerschmitt inspectors. Um, yeah, Vingo says there's the Casablanca one as well. Play it again, Sam, is never said. I think it's just a mistaken memory. I did go back to watch it relatively recently, and it's almost like a condensing of what he said, right? If you could edit what he said and you could get him to say that by just cutting out some extra words. As far as I remember, anyway, going back to look at it fairly recently, he says something along the lines of, "I said play it. I said play it. Don't ask me why. Just play it." And then Sam play it, something like that, you know. So to me, that's close. That one is pretty much open and shut as far as that one goes. But anyway, there's another example, the ant bully, and so Frank Weiss, his son, I think, wrote in answer to something here because his son said that his father made this album with a sort of a musical trombone as a riff on the logo, and I think he said he made this either in the late 70s or early 80s. I'll find it. I'll have it for you now. Which one? Uh, right. Oh, here's. I'll read this out because I know I don't have it in the right order anyway, but here's it shutting down in some factory in the US. Cornucopia of job cuts. Fruit of the Loom Incorporated said it would slash its US workforce by 12% by eliminating 3,200 jobs in 5 southern states by year end to improve profitability. Right, so at least they're being honest about it. They're not trying to say, "Oh, I want to streamline operations and it'll help the workers in some way." Blah blah blah. But it showed that they were a large volume employer. If they more or less employed 30,000 people, roughly at one point there, according to my ballpark figures. So it says 6 plants will be closed and operations will be reduced at 2 others. The nation's largest underwear maker said the affected plants were in Kentucky, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. The firm's profits dropped 39% in the third quarter to 24.5 million. So again, there's some of the logos throughout the time there, and there's that album. Now that may be a little bit too small. I'm not sure how to zoom that, and I don't want to mess it up by trying to. No, I'll won't tempt fate. Oh damn it! I did mess it up there. I'll go back to where I was. Yeah, I'll put it on screen there and just read it out anyway. Uh, whether you can see it or not. So, beg your pardon. Sorry for the small little delay here. I'm just trying to get up on a separate screen here. Right, the Fruit of the Loom cornucopia. So here's somebody discussing it on, I guess it's Reddit. It says, so this one really hit me hard. Like many others on here, I was convinced that the cornucopia had disappeared from the famous Fruit of the Loom logo. And in my mind, it's one of the strongest Mandela effects because of the leftover residual evidence of its existence, coupled with the huge amount of people that are certain it was there, including employees of the company. I've asked a handful of people over the past few days, making sure not to load the question, i.e., not asking, do you remember the cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo? But instead asking them to describe it to me without looking it up. Every single person described the fruit and either a cornucopia or a basket thing. I feel there isn't a plausible explanation for this Mandela effect. People say it's because you associate a pile of fruit with a cornucopia. However, being from the UK, I would not have made this association. I'm not sure actually why you have to be from the UK or not. I wanted to compile all evidence in one place. If anyone has any they can contribute that I've missed, then please comment. Um, and then, it was answers.com that we were looking at earlier, I think. Um, now, I want to see if I can get up. Right, the next one here on the reply. Okay, this one here. Carl Gustav says, Vingol. Oh no, read that out then if that's. Oh no, well, I will. It's another one. Star Wars. The Star Wars one. Luke, I am your father. Instead of no, I am your father. Yeah, again, that one. I don't know, but I was willing to let that one go. But then again, didn't George Lucas, and I know I've confused him with Spielberg many times. I meant to say one or the other one. But anyway, George Lucas is Star Wars, I'm pretty sure. He has, I think, like Spielberg. Yeah, he has, because I remember it well. Like when stuff would come out in VHS or DVD or Blu-ray or whatever it was, he even had several versions on VHS. I remember there was even before it went to DVD, there were director's cuts, updates. There was some versions or editions celebrating. Yeah, maybe it was a 20-year anniversary edition or a 15-year anniversary edition. So I just kind of figured, listen, there's plenty of scope for him to have gone back and changed stuff as well. So I'm just going to leave that one go. I don't really care too much then if people are going to say one way or another about that one. Carl Gustav says, yeah, and it's like if you're quoting the scene, you'd throw in the Luke for the context. Yeah, so I kind of figured, okay, that's why I let it go. Because, yeah, I could see how it could easily be a false memory. So, yeah, I think that's an easy one to agree on. So there's some answers here anyway, and I think, yeah, this is from Chat GPT, where the question is to Chat GPT, describe the Fruit of the Loom logo, please. And the answer from Chat GPT, the AI of Microsoft and OpenAI, says, the Fruit of the Loom logo is a well-recognized and iconic emblem associated with the company's clothing and underwear products. As of my last knowledge, that's weird. That's almost like an Indian writing that. As of my last knowledge, update in September 2021, the logo... oh, I see what it's saying now. His knowledge was updated in 2021. His. Right, ChatGPT's. As of my last knowledge update in September 2021, the logo consisted of a cluster of various fruits arranged in a neat, circular arrangement. These fruits typically included grapes, apples, leaves, and sometimes other elements like flowers or wheat. The design was often depicted in a simple, colourful, and somewhat stylized manner, with bold outlines and vibrant shades. The logo is designed to evoke a sense of freshness, naturalness, and comfort, aligning with the company's brand identity of providing comfortable and quality clothing products. The use of various fruits and natural elements symbolizes the idea of natural and wholesome materials, which can be associated with the comfort and durability of the products. Please note that logos can evolve over time, so there might have been changes or updates to the Fruit of the Loom logo since my last update in September of 2021. That reads like a marketing spiel as well, doesn't it? Anyway, the next question asked of ChatGPT is, does the Fruit of the Loom logo contain a cornucopia? And the answer is, which I kind of thought was strange, because the question isn't phrased this way, but it's almost like he's expecting the question as though he's aware of the Mandela effect. He says, yes, you are correct. He didn't ask him, am I correct that it contains one? He just says, does it contain one? So to me, this gets my spidey senses kind of going, okay, I'm wondering whether there's something deceptive going on here, or whether ChatGPT has been programmed to tell the answer that it knows conspiracy theorists wants, so that they'll be set up to be made look like a fool later. I don't know. In case people point to ChatGPT and go, well, ChatGPT says it's correct, and it must be true if he says it. And what they don't realize is they're then basically appointing ChatGPT to be the arbiter of truth, which I certainly do not agree with. So there could be meta tricks going on here. Anyway, he says, yes, you are correct. The Fruit of the Loom logo often features a cornucopia as one of its central elements. The cornucopia is a symbol of abundance and plenty, typically depicted as a horn-shaped container overflowing with fruits, vegetables, and other agricultural products. In the context of the Fruit of the Loom logo, the cornucopia reinforces the idea of the company's products being associated with comfort, quality, and naturalness. The cornucopia in the logo further emphasizes the brand's connection to natural materials and a diverse range of products, which aligns with the company's history of producing a variety of clothing and undergarment items. Please keep in mind that my knowledge is based on information available up until September of 2021, and there may have been changes or updates to the logo since then. All right, well, whatever. I'm just reading this out for completeness sake, even though it's repetitious. Right, now he says, new chat. Does the Fruit of the Loom logo contain a cornucopia? And this version of the chat says, no, the Fruit of the Loom logo does not contain a cornucopia. This is a common misconception, but the logo actually features a simple image of a bunch of fruit, including grapes, apples, and leaves. There is no cornucopia depicted in the official Fruit of the Loom logo. The confusion might arise from the association of fruit and a cornucopia, which is a symbol of abundance and plenty, often depicted as a horn-shaped container overflowing with produce. Okay, so ChatGPT can just say whatever, whenever, but it doesn't say when that update was, if it was before or after. So Carl Gustav there says, ChatGPT refused to list the 10 hottest peppers for me because it's a controversial topic which is potentially harmful to children. That's pretty bizarre. And he says, so in retaliation, I made it write steamy love letters between Moustache Man and Frankly Anne in the style of Dr. Zayas. And it agreed to that. That's amazing if it agreed to that. That's bizarre. It's not consistent at all then, I would have thought. That's weird, but I'd love to... If you could somehow get some of those letters to me, I'd love to read them out on the next live stream that I do. That sounds fantastic. Okay. Now, I'll read out something else here from the Know Your Meme. And yeah, I guess it must be from... Okay, so this is what I wanted to read out earlier. From Osvingul there says, I must go. Thanks for the stream, EE, and cheers, chatters. Okay, cheers, Vingul. And talk to you next time. Thanks for listening until now. So here's Reed Chappell, who is Ellis's son. And Ellis Chappell, I take it from this context, is the guy who had the album cover this album cover here. I think that's it. But anyway, I'll read on here now. He says, I received. Oh, I got. Damn it. Not sure if I have the thing that he sent. Anyway, I'll read this out. I received a reply the next day from Reed Chappell, Ellis's son. Hi, redacted. This is Reed, Ellis's son, responding for my dad here. I remember the cornucopia specifically, as does my dad. This is the second time we've been contacted about this album cover, and Ellis and I are more than happy to answer any questions you have about it. I was a little kid when Ellis painted the Flute of the Loom cover. Ah, okay, so he's not the musical artist. He made the cover for the album. And I remember specifically this album, he says, being a reference to the cornucopia in Fruit of the Loom's original logo, which is where my dad says he specifically got the inspiration for the design when I talked to him about it. He said, why the hell else would I have used a cornucopia? The food coming out of the flute is soul food, actually a ham hock, cabbage and black-eyed peas, etc. I remember when, in my mind, Fruit of the Loom quit using a cornucopia in their logo and switched to just using fruit by itself. It impressed me because I thought the logo looked better with a cornucopia in it. So maybe he's using the word impressed, not in the sense of that he thought it was a great thing. It formed a solid memory in his mind. So he says, in my memories, this was roughly around 1978 when I was in second grade. So anyway, feel free to ask away. Thanks a lot, Reed and Ellis Chappell. Fruit of the Loom. The company denies it anyway. So this person got on to some kind of web chat with a representative of Fruit of the Loom, but who knows if they're talking to a bot or somebody who just started there anyway in the last 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or 2 years. How does anybody, have you ever met anybody in a corporation that really knows anything about a corporation anyway? They just know what they do. Even if they're in PR, they just know what their cheat sheets or whatever the official corporate presentations tell them to say. Anyway, for what it's worth, he says, this person says, is it true that the logo never had a cornucopia? And the representative from Fruit of the Loom says, hi, Emma, yes, it's true. The cornucopia never existed. Even some of us are still convinced it was a thing, though. So relatable, isn't it? And the person says, who asked, says, thanks for the response. And the representative says, please feel free to reach out with any future inquiries. I can't stand even that level of corporate speak. So to me, anyway, as I say, these two pictures pretty much nailed it for me. This one and the other one of the t-shirt. That makes me think that the company is lying, or somebody's lying about it. That, or maybe better yet, say I do think that the logo was changed, and it did at some point have the horn or the basket of plenty behind the fruit there. But all of that was supposed to be just a lead-in to the idea of Nelson Mandela. But now I'm beginning to wonder whether I've, like always, gotten sidetracked, gone too long on something. And I'm still reeling with embarrassment for having muted myself for at least 5 minutes in the beginning. So I'm trying to see what time it is now. Okay, so I've been nearly going for an hour and a half. What I'll do is I'll go back to the Fruit of the Loom, know your meme here, because I think there might be some more information here that maybe I haven't covered. So it says, yeah, okay. Sorry for a bit of dead air while I try and find my place. The Fruit of the Loom on knowyourmeme.com. If you don't know that website, it is great for looking up this stuff, but I guess it's not 100% up on, whether this is. I guess it's, look, the right thing to do is it is allowing us to form our own judgment but I'm just trying to see whether I kind of more or less covered everything. Look, there are some, maybe the reason why I called it fruit of TikTok is because, okay, I'm I'm not on TikTok, I guess. I mean, I've seen some TikToks. I've probably seen more TikToks which have been transferred into um, YouTube Shorts. But look, TikTok is a whole other culture than in itself, and I guess Gen Z and younger is mostly on it, and they are interested in this as well. And there are some TikToks with, I guess, millions of views, and they have been regenerating interest in this. Um, so yeah, and this is going back to January 23rd, 2022. A TikToker, Madeline Morera, posted a video about the logo that accrued over 800,000 views and 150,000 likes in 1 year, sparking interest on it in the app. And on January 29th, TikToker Lil Broomstick '06 posted a meme about the logo that gained over 700,000 views and 140,000 likes in 1 year. So people are still talking about it. Um, but look, again, as I say, it was only supposed to be a lead in. So I will go maybe another half an hour and just sort of say to you, okay, well, at the outset there, A already basically gave the explanation for the eponymous Mandela effect. That it isn't, like, it's a misnomer in itself. That Mandela didn't die in prison. That was people confusing him with Steve Biko and the story of, what was it called, Born Free. It was a whole similar thing, and that would have been all wrapped up into it. There's other things now. There was basically Paul Simon and his singers, the Ladysmith something singers from a town basically who became world famous, a town called Ladysmith, named after some English lord or landed gentry guy's Spanish wife, Lady Smith. And it's more or less between Durban, halfway between Durban and Johannesburg, I'd say. And there were some, these kind of a cappella harmony singers. They'd sing in different harmonies, and they were made world famous. I suppose not just because of Paul Simon, but on his, I think it was on his Graceland album, but I think he did other albums with them as well. All of that music, going, whoa, yeah, we want to be free, and then harmonizing with all that, that would have been all wrapped up into it as well. And people just get a general sense of stuff rather than any clear memories about what things are. I suppose I'll say what it all combines together in is in almost a supernatural. More, it's far more than just propaganda, far more than just marketing or media manipulation. It's basically, I think, what all of us have come to recognize as being like creating a big spell casting to manipulate the minds of people in a way that we are only, I think, I'll speak for myself, I've only recently started to understand it in the level at which it operates, on the scale at which it operates. A there says, I'm in so much pain. I've been bedridden most of the week. I'm sorry to hear that. I remember you talking about it before. Is this a chronic physical problem you have with your spine for a long time? Because I seem to remember you did mention this before, and quite a while ago. It must be more than a year ago. So this is not just a recent thing that you have. I'm sorry to hear that. Carl says, yeah, sorry about that to A. And A says, thanks, at least I've got the form. I think he says, at least I got the from the doc. THC, maybe he says. Okay, so he can use it as medicine in Australia. So I'm guessing that you have a sort of a chronic long-term condition, if not an illness and condition. I'm sorry to hear that. Anyway, I'm going to use it to segue into Nelson Mandela because, look, I don't know this, but although it always seems to take many hours, maybe even sometimes 24 hours, doing a full, what does it call it, transcript of everything, I'm going to start off with Nelson Mandela, right? Because I'm not going to say, I'll leave it till next time to say about my experiences of growing up and hearing what I heard, or what I heard on the radio or saw on TV, or just picked up through whatever kind of osmosis that we, to use that euphemism to say, however we sort of get ideas into our heads, generally speaking, that the people around us might have more adult ideas about what things are and what's going on. So I'll wait till next time to speak more about what I thought that I knew about Nelson Mandela and South Africa when I was growing up. And I'll leave it till another time to talk about my experiences in South Africa. I'm just going to see how much I can get read into the record of. Let's start at the beginning with Nelson Mandela, and then I can continue from whatever point then next time. So I'll try and go for maybe another 20 minutes to 30 minutes and then leave it at around the 2 hour mark. Um, just see there. Darren Swift says, "We are souls." And I'll come back to that in just 1 second as a slight aside. A says, Mandela was like Trump. We wanted to believe. Ah, did we? But I see the parallel now. And I tell you what, there are parallels to Trump now. I'll say this, right? In that Nelson Mandela was made a martyr out of by being put in prison, essentially. Which is the worst way to do it. Like, if you don't want your enemy to basically be ultimately successful, it's almost like that they did it as a strategy to make him be a living saint by putting him in prison on Robben Island, or Obben, I think it's spelt. In the same way, even if they don't put Trump in prison now, the fact that they've so as far as I hear, convicted him on all counts of whatever their trumped up charges were, and people maybe in the future will get confused between. So wait a minute, was he called Trump before they trumped up the charges? But anyway, if they do actually put him in prison, and if they do make him president while he is in prison, and then he pardons himself and all this, and then comes out of prison victorious as the new president, that's basically following the same script as Nelson Mandela. And again, it just goes to show how fake and scripted everything is if they do that, and how contrived it is, and how short people's memories are, and how the same old tricks just, pulled off again and again and again will work. Darren Swift says, this existence is real. We muffed it with our decision in the garden. The new system of things is coming, God's paradise of many mansions. Now, maybe you're listening back to the beginning, I don't know, and commenting on what I was saying there to do with, how do you know if I'm real, if you're real, if reality is real, what is virtual reality? And, what does it mean to be incarnate? And all that kind of thing. Maybe you're commenting on that. And I'll just say, as far as we are souls, I was checking this up on, well, I guess it must have been just checking what the Latin word is again. So, or maybe it's Greek. Maybe it's Greek and Latin. So Carl Jung uses animus and anima for the male and female spirit, but he tags on a few more attributes and characteristics to these things. But animus, or anima, in Latin is the soul. And, when something is animated, that there's, not like as in a cartoon, but when somebody has a character, when they are more than just a physical body, I do subscribe to this, that doesn't make them living. What makes them living, what animates the physical body is whatever that intangible thing is that we call a soul. And I do find it that seeing the Latin word is animus, from where we got to animate something, to bring it to life. That's really what an animation is. It brings a drawing to life when it's moving, that is the soul. And in the Irish language, the word for a name is anim. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, that's totally parallel, got nothing to do with it. Maybe not. But it then makes me kind of think, when somebody says, what is your name? What they're really asking is, who are you? Let me know the person behind the eyes, whatever is that light that lights up the consciousness. Not just the thing, that the conscience that lets you know good from evil, or the moral compass, but the consciousness the soul or the wherever it is, whether it's in your chest or your mind or your heart or whatever it might be, that we also recognize that when a person dies, what remains is just, to put it in a progressive parlance, a clump of cells, a clump of dying cells, or rapidly decomposing cells. And you see it rapidly decomposing after the thing that lit it up is gone. And I do subscribe to the idea that it is at the point of conception where this light goes into that same clump of cells and it begins growing from that point. So, Anim is a name in Irish, A-I-N-I-M, I think, or maybe it's A-N-I-M. And in Latin, A-N-I-M-U-S is that thing that we call a soul. So I'll just read a couple of more comments here and then see how far I get with Nelson Mandela from his Wikipedia entry, which, of course, people might say, oh, yeah, well, I mean, that's going to be edited by people who wanted to read a certain way, but I always think that it's very instructive to read things in their own body of work to see what they are claiming is the truth and whatnot. A says, I love the scene from the movie Shooter. Remember Anna Nicole married for love. When you think you got it figured, you got no idea. I remember looking at, and oh God, well, I won't get distracted too far with this. I'll come back, maybe if I think of it or remember next week. I remember reading up on that relatively recently, maybe in the last year or two, and thinking like that it was just a case of her marrying an old man very obviously for his billions. But I read about the fella's life and the reason why he did it, why he left her some money and what he did for his children and that kind of thing. He seemed like a very sensible, very decent man. And I found myself, excuse me, I found myself agreeing with basically everything he did. He seemed like he was sensible and that his children weren't actually very good people. Um, and I sort of ended up even kind of seeing things from Anna Nicole Smith's point of view as well. So there's a bit more to it than met the eye with that. Excuse me for coughing there. Anyway, I'm just going to see how far I get, as I say, with Nelson Mandela here, in the next 20 minutes or thereabouts, and then I'll hopefully pick it up from that point next time. Right, Nelson Rohihalana Mandela. I'll give it another go. That Rolihalaha Halahla. Right, I guess I'm not going to get it right, but anyway, that's his name there officially. Nelson Mandela Rohihalala was a South African anti-apartheid activist, politician and statesman who served as the first president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He was the country's first black head of state and the first elected in a fully representative democratic election. His government focused on dismantling the legacy of apartheid by fostering racial reconciliation. I'm saying reconciliation there because I think that is a word that, if it gets unpacked, is quite euphemistic, but I'll read out Wikipedia's sort of summary of it. Reconciliation is conflict resolution. Again, where we have nested euphemisms, is conceptualized as the methods and processes involved in facilitating the peaceful ending of conflict and retribution. Committed, well, it doesn't say if it ends retribution or part of its process is retribution. It depends on whether you might put a comma somewhere or not. Committed group members attempt to resolve group conflicts by actively communicating information about their conflicting motives or ideologies to the rest of the group, and blah, blah, blah. I'll leave it there anyway. Now, A says, Mandela had an apron and brought Roe v. Wade to South Africa. Did he indeed? I did assume that he was an apron kind of a guy. But I'm going to have to read up on how he brought more of the Roe v. Wade stuff into South Africa. That's interesting. I don't think I knew that. But there was something I was going to try and bring this week, but I'll see if I'll I'll better see if I can find it for next week and bring it next week. A says, in jail for 196 charges of bombing women and children and made to be a saint. Good man, A. Well, that's what I was hoping to get to. And I guess, so, yeah, write what you like there into the chat, because he's the, he could be, like, apart from maybe Che Guevara or Fidel Castro, he is definitely up there with them as being the excellent example of somebody to whom the phrase applies: one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And it just is amazing how in the Western world, how in Europe and in America, people kind of talk about how he's a saint. And by the way, I can tell you as well, even in South Africa, a lot of white people speak about him as though he was a saint. Oh, if only we could go back to those halcyon days type thing, you know? And I said I wasn't going to do it, but I guess, look, I'll just say this, that I have spent time in South Africa, on and off. I've spent several years, and there's basically the normie exists in South Africa as well. And there's a different culture, yeah, a different base culture, but even people who would be considered to be extreme racists, if they kind of talked as freely as they do in South Africa, if they did the same in Europe or America, those same people would be progressives there too, and delusional and self-delusional, and they would be remembering false versions of history and or convenient versions of history, or politically correct versions of history as well, you know. And you're right, yes, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro were people who he praised for sure, yeah. Although I'm not saying either, because, like, let me just see how if I can word this right. So if I had to choose now between Fidel Castro and Joe Biden, right, I would choose Fidel Castro, because at least he might be more of an honest, trustworthy person. You know what I mean? So it's very the West has fallen so far that I can't think of a single leader or potential leader that I would trust more than maybe Nelson Mandela or Che Guevara or Fidel Castro. You know, even though I won't play it now, but I won't. But there was a video I was watching recently where he went to America and he was asked questions in some kind of town hall meeting hosted by one of the news agencies. And I'll play it next week. And they had people asking him questions, and he was saying, "Oh, we shouldn't assume that people like those are our enemies." But he says, well, he's not going to consider those people enemies as long as they support his cause, and his cause was his people. You know. I'll read out a couple of these comments now that you've got here. Carl, first of all, says, Carl Gustav says, he was a real stand-up fellow. Goodyear's #1 customer on the continent. Exactly, Carl, exactly. I think I read there that he said that he had to, or he did divorce his wife Winnie, and married the widow of the I don't know if it was prime minister or president of Mozambique, which again seems like, you know, like kings and queens marrying each other for political advantage. It's very much the same thing. But I think the official recorded version of history is that he did that after some poor, how did they phrase it? They have all these phrases like some protester or somebody doing a rebel thing unfortunately got attacked and unalived in I don't know if it was Soweto or somewhere anyway. And of course Nelson doesn't stand for that. Now, didn't mention anything to do with Goodyears or you know, burning rubber or anything like that through burnouts. But you know, I think again we'll see how. Problem is, there's this theory you have to get so far into your live stream, but I want to leave that till next week anyway. But yeah, look, no harm in setting these things roughly out onto the table anyway. So he says, yeah, #1 customer on the continent. A says, my uncle was in Border wars, really? Okay, so he's in Namibia fighting Cubans. Okay, so then, so I wasn't doing any fighting in Namibia, but I have traveled through Namibia, and that was before. I don't remember exactly what year, but until some point in the 70s, I think, it was known as German Southwest Africa. No, maybe it was the 60s. German Southwest Africa, and Mozambique, as far as I remember, was German Southeast Africa. I think anyway. Um, and Angola was just above Namibia, or is just above Namibia. And yes, what most people in America and Europe, and I can't claim to be any expert in this either, but were unaware that while the Cold War was going on, this threat that there might be a war between an outright war, like there is still now, like that they might kind of stop pretending to have wars with each other through their proxies, such as Ukraine. And by the way, the Ukraine means the borderlands. And it absolutely was a buffer state, satellite territory, or peripheral territory of the USSR and of the Russian Empire. So I say that without saying that I don't have any particular affinity with or love for Russian people. But speaking objectively, it is a sort of a DMZ. It acted as not just a buffer, but as a borderland between Europe and Russia. So obviously there would be Russian influence more so on the eastern side, and some European influence on the western side of it. Like, duh. But anyway, what most people are unaware of is that in Angola and in German Southwest Africa and in other places like present day Zimbabwe and Mozambique and Zambia, there would have been communists or rebels or whatever. They'll call themselves communists if they want, or if it suits them, if it gets them supplied with arms from the USSR at the time, or Russia or whatever, if they get Kalashnikovs and whatever else to basically fight for their independence, so-called, to rule their own countries, which the British Empire would have carved up anyway, mostly, but Portuguese as well, and the Dutch to some extent too, and the Belgians, and yeah, forgot to mention the Congo there, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So in all these countries, there were supposed rebels fighting with Soviet-supplied arms against basically people in Angola and South Africa, and or from South Africa, going up to fight in Namibia and Angola. And the Americans basically just, well, I say the Americans, but we all now know who was in charge of the Americans. Either didn't assist at all, or did their level best to sabotage them. So, look, if you want to find out more about that, who I would recommend would be a fella called Jan, that's Jan Lamprecht, that's Lamprecht, Lamprecht, or maybe Jan van Lamprecht, and he's got a channel called History Reviewed channel, and you'll probably find him on the alternative sites. And just recently he's come out with his third part in a very long but well worth listening to, his own sort of investigation and recounting of from his perspective and from historical documents of the reality of what that war was, what the CIA knew, what the Americans in inverted commas knew, and what the Russians were doing to basically agitate in South Africa. Not because out of the goodness of their hearts they just wanted to have Africans free, but they wanted to get in there themselves and control it. So I'll pause there and just read a couple more there. Carl Gustav says, life is 100 times worse under the ANC, no matter your colour. And I think, actually, I mean, I've certainly met many black people in South Africa who've said that to me, more or less unprompted. And I guess the reason why they would be more keen to say that to somebody like me is because obviously they recognize, well, they know when I talk that I'm not a South African. And so a lot of them would be keen to sort of say, by the way, all you guys, meaning Europeans and Americans, have the wrong idea down here, about, or the wrong idea of things down here. So, like, there's a lot of black people who aren't stupid, they know what's going on. And I guess, as Ronald Reagan would have said, it comes down to the economy and quality of life. And of course, like, maybe they wouldn't go so far as to say this, perhaps, but what a lot of them are more or less saying, this is the way I interpret it, is that they're saying we no longer want our own people to be in charge of us. We preferred things. Now, some people would say this. Some people would actually outright say we preferred things under white rule. What they mean is under Afrikaner rule. Um, who are basically the Dutch people, but they wouldn't mind being under English rule either. Um, Dutch descended people, or, you know, Germanic type people. And as well, they say that things were more fair, there was more justice, that we could always come to those people and they would sort out sort of fights or disputes between different tribes as well. And maybe I've said this before, maybe I don't know. But anyway, there we are anyway. Plenty of people would say that to me. Um, A says, I am on a watch list because of chat like this. He says, no to all violence. Aussie is unreal. Really went to crap when the Portuguese pulled out. I guess you're talking about Angola there, I presume. But maybe, I shouldn't presume. Carl Gustav says, Guten Tag, homie. And Carl says, oh, I always wondered why they said the Ukraine. Well, I'm so glad that I was able to mention that little bit of information, which I had to go some length to confirm. Somebody had told me, but I did find it after reading enough about it and maybe translating it and that kind of thing, because to me, that fact it tells us all we need to know really about what's going on there. A says, all betrayed by UN scam. I think is what you're saying, or maybe unscam. Sorry, Uncle Sam and the UN, right? Unscam. Uncle Sam is an unscam, is a UN scam. Well, maybe I misread that for a reason, or maybe that's what you meant. And the UN, yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the UN is just people creating another supposedly global institution in order to give themselves permission to do what they wanted to do anyway. It's all a nonsense. Having mandates from this place and that place, it's all nonsense. It's all different sock puppets. Right, I'll just get back to reading a bit more now about Nelson Mandela, and then, like, when we sort of finish up here, we'll be able to I want to look for a point where I'm not going to be able to get as far as I wanted to today, but at least you guys will be able to sort of remind me as well. No, let's start from this point and we'll move on, okay? But anyway, as I say, that fella I recommend. And as far as being on a watch list, listen, I mean, I'm going to be embarrassed if I'm not by the end of my life. And I've said it before, like, I mean, I'm not somebody who, I'm basically very demoralized. I'm not advocating, these kind of things that they like picking you up for. I'm going to ask any question and I'm going to speak anything as far as I honestly believe that it is as close to the truth, or I'm getting there as I can. And I'm not going to be afraid. And and if there's an afterlife, I'm going to be embarrassed if I didn't do my level best to speak up and be, stop being a coward and just have the courage of my convictions. Because as far as I'm concerned, that's as pretty much close to the test as you can get. Like, when all around you are trying to persecute you, when all around you are losing their heads and their minds, can you just basically say your piece, or speak your truth, or forever hold your peace, a bit like the marriage vows, that kind of way. Freedom of speech, exactly. I'm not going to kowtow or cower down. Basically, there's nothing you can say then anymore. Certainly not going to repeat their lies. Anyway, I'm just reading out the Wikipedia entry from Nelson Mandela here. So he was the country's, South Africa's, first black head of state and the first elected in a fully representative democratic election. His government focused on dismantling the legacy of apartheid. And I'll just very briefly hover over what that says, because people might think they know what it means, but there might be a lot of people who genuinely don't. So apartheid. So in German, when something ends in HEIT, it means the quality of, more or less. It's completely analogous to the suffix ness at the end of our words like happiness. But in this case, it means apartness, to be separate, the quality of being apart, separate but equal type thing, So in Afrikaans or Dutch, it's HEID, but in German, it's HEIT. But the D and the T are interchangeable, to transliterate between those languages. So apartheid was a system of institutionalized racial segregation. Oh no, that existed in South Africa and Southwest Africa. Well, that's current day Namibia, from 1948. And by the way, the reason why it's lumping it in there is the two separate countries now is because I can't remember what the dates were, but at some point anyway, Namibia was basically under the remit from the UN, just like the Britain had this mandate to control Palestine with a view to handing it off to independence at some point. Well, also South Africa had a similar kind of mandate, as they call it, from the UN to basically look after the running of Namibia until it was basically ready to stand on its own 2 feet. But I can tell you that until this very day, the current day, and looks like it'll continue that way for the next foreseeable little future until the rand falls. But it's been falling for a long time. But anyway, the Namibian, and my God, I forget. But for the next time, I saved currency from every country that I went into, so I forget what it is now. But anyway, the Namibian, let's call it the dollar anyway, but it's not a dollar. It is pegged to the South African rand. So it's a funny thing. So basically it's a 1-to-1, but they have their own version of their own currency. But so even though they're independent, they're not really independent because they have the same currency, just printed slightly differently as the South African rand. So, you can't call yourself independent or a nation or an independent nation if you don't really control your own money. I think we can all relate to that. But anyway, South Africa and Southwest Africa from 1948 to the early 1990s. So again, why they say early 1990s is because from 1990 onwards, that was the end of apartheid, for all intents and purposes. In other words, de facto the end, but it was legally, officially the end in 1994. Apartheid was characterized by see, this is the thing. It does. They're saying it's not just that the races were kept separate, but that it was characterized by an authoritarian political culture based on Bas Cap, which ensured that South Africa was dominated by, and they're going to say, certain races and whatever, Now, I'll just pause there for a second. Carl Gustav says, disassembling the legacy of apartheid, one copper wire at a time. Exactly. Good on you. I think Carl was saying with regard to freedom of speech and all of us just having the courage to speak up. Because I do think that there is if I can use the dam analogy, there is a growing body of people who are getting, like you and me, ordinary people who were, and perhaps still are, completely law-abiding people who used to be model citizens. But now all of our collective governments have told us, if we've been paying attention, that they no longer want us to be citizens, that they have replacements for us. So I consider the social contract to be broken, completely broken and irreparable. But if they'd like to see if they can renegotiate it, maybe they'd like to come and talk to me. And if they do, we'll talk man to man or men to man. But I'm not going to be cowering. I can't say that and I shouldn't say this. No, And I think that there are a lot of people who are like me now. Ordinary people, not violent people, not irrational people, just ordinary people who've had more than enough. And it was 10 years ago that we flung our windows open and said, I say 10 years ago, it was a long time ago, that we felt like that man in that movie. What was it called? What was it? News? Newsroom? Oh, God. But anyway, I think it was 1978 where he flings open the window and says, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm uh, beyond God and religion, beyond freedom and rage, beyond despondency. There isn't even a people left worth saving. All that's left worth saving is truth. And that's so I'm not going to turn against it. Not like any Peter saying, "Oh, I don't know, I've never heard of him," right? Not like Judas going to stab him in the back, right? I would be honored to be a martyr for the truth if that's what it comes to. Network, that's it. The Network News Network. That's it. Thanks a lot, Carl. Um, Carl says one of the highest standards of living on Earth. Oh, in South Africa. Yep, I think in 1969 they did the first heart transplant, and they provided that highest standard of Western medicine to all people, not just white people. There's your legacy of apartheid for you. Um, yeah, the Rugby World Cup was a huge deal. Yeah, I didn't. I don't know how you feel about it now, and I don't mean it as an insult. A says he was there in '94 for the Rugby World Cup. It was a huge deal. And maybe they did their vuvuzelas then as well, did they? I guess they probably did. Um, I, I'm pretty sure my uncle would have gone there at the same time for the Rugby World Cup, and he loved Cape Town, or South Africa anyway. But of course, who wouldn't? It's a beautiful place. Um, it's still a lot for a tourist. It's still for American or European tourists. It's still cheaper, right? For things like eating out and wine and restaurants and things like that. But you have to put on blinkers if you like to sort of pretend that things aren't the way they are. I can't eat in a fine restaurant knowing that whatever country I'm in is falling apart around me. But anyway, A says I was there in 1990 and last in 2004. Total change. Right, right, right. Okay. Um, I I'm not. Next week I'll say when I was there and when I wasn't there. Maybe okay. But I was there during. I'll say this. I was there during the convids. So I'll talk a bit more about it next week. I think I have mentioned that before. Um. Oh, I forgot to finish off the rest of Carl Gustav's commentary. He says life expectancy rivaling the Okinawans. Why do I forget what Okinawa? Oh, the Japanese, right? That's Japanese, isn't it? Even had their own nuclear program despite a global embargo. Well, I visited the nuclear power plant in Cape Town, and I seem to remember it was something like a 4 megawatt or maybe 4.8 megawatt facility. Megawatt? Gigawatt it must be. Oh, getting confused now. But it was built by the French. But yeah, and the French were very good to the South Africans in that regard, and in other regards too. I forgot to mention the French when it comes to their contribution to civilization in Africa. And to this day, so I'll talk about electricity in South Africa and Africa later. That has deteriorated big time as well. I think I've mentioned it before, but I'll talk about it again next week. Um, and things have deteriorated in that regard, unfortunately. And there's a connection as far as the nuclear stuff to a certain country in the Middle East. I think I mentioned it before as well, but anyway, I'll just get on with this a little bit more, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. I'll read a few more comments and we'll wrap things up. So we've covered apartheid there, or just haven't just introduced the term. So ideologically, Nelson Mandela was an African nationalist and socialist. Socialist in the sense of communist. And he served as president of the African National Congress, a party. Sorry, African. He served as the president of the African National Congress Party from 1991 to 1997. A says World Cup was like mass hypnosis, a bit like recent times. Yeah, yeah. I think we know then. It's just sports ball to distract people with. And A says they were besties with Eskimos before the 90 were they before 1994 were they? Until Nelson Mandela decided, did he? Because I mean, it seems like maybe he decided that these people were useful to him in achieving what he wanted, and then once he achieved what he wanted, maybe he discarded them. Maybe that's how it went. There's certainly on the surface of it, that's how it looks like it might have been. But anyway, maybe he had to keep them sweet. But also he might have said, "Look, I'm clever enough to realize that we both help each other, but I'm not just going to be your puppet." Maybe he decided that. It's hard to say because these days, I'm going to have to double check this, but is it still Cyril Ramaphosa who's in charge of or who is the president of South Africa? Good God, I think he's been talking about Palestine in a way that is very supportive, which again is sort of an apparent contradiction. It's very unusual. it's something I don't really quite know how to explain. I thought I saw a comment pop up there, but anyway, maybe you were attracted to comment there. So, ideologically, as I say, African nationalist and socialist, and he served as the president of the ANC from 1991 to 1997. He is, and let's see if I can pronounce this correctly, he is a Xhosa. Not really, he is a Xhosa. He is a Xhosa. Okay, I got more of a back throat click there. It's spelled Xhosa. From now on, I'll probably just say Xhosa, as if it was a C. But you're supposed to do the Xhosa thing. So, Mandela, it's a type, it's a tribe. Basically, it's the second most, as far as I can make out anyway, populous and powerful tribe in South Africa after the Zulu or Bantu type tribe. Zulu tribe, let's call it anyway. Because, look, I mean, maybe I've sort of said that the ANC is the Zulu tribe. And maybe it is more so now, or maybe it always was from its conception. But maybe they want to sort of make it, and I'm sure at some point they did coalesce and want, I forget the history of it, make it want to be that, for political expediency, that there would be a single sort of biggest party that would represent all black tribes. But, I mean, after a while, like, you can see that there are facial differences and you can kind of have a good idea of who's a Xhosa and who's a Zulu. And they can certainly see a difference. They can recognize differences in each other. But for political expediency, they would likely sort of say, well, look, we'll all be members of this same black nationalist party, let's call it, Um, Carl says, it's hard to pronounce without the bone. And A says, the US has enough stuff in Botswana to flatten South Africa before they can even mobilize. Really? Okay. I did not know that. I have visited Botswana, um, but I only spent a few days there, and I really can't say that I know much about Botswana, um, other than people told me that they don't have the same kind of problems there, as much as South Africa and Namibia, um, or certainly Zimbabwe have. So they say that it's run very well. Now, I can't really get into why they told me that might be just now, I guess. But I wonder whether a strong US influence there, or presence even, if what you might be suggesting is there might be what's going on. That's very interesting. Jeez, I'd like to find out more about that. Um, Carl says the Bantu are non-native. Yes, well, look, I guess I'll just say at this point, right? I don't think anybody, what a lot of people told me was that nobody really knows what the population of South Africa is. But you can see that the population, I mean, let's say this, if you think that there are unknown amounts of immigrants, doesn't matter whether you want to call them illegal or legal or whatever, just basically people from outside of the United States streaming into the United States from the southern border. If you think that that's in large numbers or has been going on for a long time, well, certainly since the 1990s, that has been happening. And so many people told me that there's really no way to say how many people have come from, like black people have come from more northerly parts of Africa into South Africa. And they do it every day, in trucks, hanging on the back of trucks, sitting on top of trucks, whatever. And it's quite easy if you are black to get through. But if you're white, you go through the normal checks, you go through the normal borders. And so what a lot of people told me was that basically there could be 20, but that would be a really low estimate of the black population in South Africa. Could be 30 million, they say, but there could be 60 million. You just wouldn't know. Maybe more black people living in South Africa now. And like tens of millions of those would have arrived after apartheid ended. So they weren't from South Africa originally. And again, who knows how many white people? Like there could be 4 million. Maybe there's a bit more. Maybe there's 3 million. It's very hard to say. So it's certainly like the demographics there are overwhelming in that sense. A says his guess is 60 million, and you certainly seem to be very knowledgeable on South and Southern Africa here. So that's what I've heard as well. Maybe more. Maybe it's more. A says Robben Island had naval guns controlled from secret bunkers under Table Mountain. Wow. Again, I'd love to know more about that, but I'll say again, like we've been talking about conspiracy theories, I'm open to learning more about anything. Um, he says, I think it's the biggest base in Africa. And there's Bianca saying hello. Salute, Ave. Good to see you there. I'll see if I can find the footage, and I think I did put some of the footage in one of the first few videos I put up when I was sort of saying, look, there's something brewing. This was before, I guess it would have had to been before 2020. I said, look, there's something brewing. Whatever happens, try and be good friends with your neighbors and, try and put aside small differences with your family. Well, that didn't happen. But some of the footage that I showed was from a military, what do they call them? Exhibitions or expedition? No, not expedition. An exhibition. Military exhibition. In or near Blauberg Strand, which is Blue Mountain Strand in coastal Cape Town. Like a bit outside of the city, but I guess what would you call it? The sort of northwest suburbs. And it's a beautiful place. And there was a military exhibition there, military march, and there was planes flying over and all that kind of thing. So the planes and all that, when they fly over, and the helicopters and all that, it's impressive. When they do it in formation, and you kind of feel like, well, there has to be a certain level of competence there. But what I would say, on the ground, it was shocking to see how unfit so many of them were, and how rotund so many of them were. And there was a lot of females, but it wasn't just the females who were unfit and rotund and couldn't keep pace and were walking all over the place and couldn't hold their rifle properly. But there was a lot of there was a lot of men there as well who I'm going to say most of the army were black. There might have been one or two who weren't. But there was a whole troop of them who basically did their march, and it was fair enough. I'll say, right, they were in full uniform or whatever, right? So it is hot. Fair enough. Okay, I'll give them full credit. But when they finished marching up to wherever they were marching, wherever there was the end of the marching line, they basically just all placed their rifles down on the ground in any higgledy-piggledy manner. And some of them didn't even just place them down on the ground, they just dropped them on the ground and then just sat all around the place in a way that was most unbecoming to the uniform. And, a lot of the people in the crowd and around me, like some of the people there were ex-military, and they were not impressed with this. They were saying, in my day, if I would have basically abandoned my rifle like that, I would have been, um, if not court-martialed, I would have been severely reprimanded in a way that they would never have forgotten by their commanding officer. So, but they were aghast and distraught at this. But I was kind of trying to console them by sort of saying, well, at the same time, maybe be appreciative that if this particular army would ever go to war against its own citizens, that you don't appear to have much to worry about. Unless, as Joe Biden says, you're going to have to get your own F-16s or whatever it was they had there. And to be honest, I don't remember or couldn't identify from underneath what it was that they were flying. But I think they were probably MiGs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had some. And in fact, I do remember seeing that they had a mix mash of a lot of hardware from both the United States and it looked like they had, excuse me, ex-USSR stuff as well. And I think maybe I do remember people saying, oh yeah, they just use and capture whatever they might have had from any different wars, any of the border wars maybe. Carl Gustav says, sounds like any other government jobs program, no different than a DMV, absolutely unprofessional in all fields. So that's what I'm getting at there, And it was a sorry sight to see. But at the same time, I was trying to be impartial and saying, well, I'm not sort of marching up and down there, that whole coast road, wearing a cap and, a jacket maybe, or a shirt with a some kind of a pullover or whatever it might be. So I would sort of say I do understand, but at the same time, it wasn't a good look. And yeah, I mean, it's more than I'm being sexist than racist here. Like, a lot of the women, when they walk, there are these things called adipose deposits, where you actually think that these people must have some kind of a deformity. But then I'm just going to explain this, right? I don't mean it in that way, but it looks actually that it would be impossible to walk or even make trousers that would fit in, that could possibly fit. But I'm going to say, when you see them in their natural environment, walking somewhere between, one town or village to another, and I've seen plenty of them do this in the countryside, they're able to have a baby, and they're able to strap that baby. Basically, what's it called? Where you waddle. I think it's called when you waddle. You wrap a textile, just a sheet around the baby, and you put the baby into the nape of the back. And they have such large fat deposits on their posterior that the baby is able to just be strapped to their back, and they're able to walk miles, and the baby is perfectly content in the nape of her back as she walks along, and it's no problem to her, and the baby does not fall down. So that is a perfect adaptation. They just absolutely weren't suited to be put in this uniform marching up and down the coast road, So I'm not criticizing them from a point of view of, that they shouldn't be in the army, or because of like, how dare they. I'm sort of saying like that is not something that somebody should have pushed them into doing. And it's just not their best use. But of course, like everywhere, there are, for whatever political reasons people are told, like that people have to be seen to have these people in whatever, the way it is. Swaddle, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you very much, Carl. Not waddle, but swaddle. And when you see that, then you realize these people are built for survival. In the countryside in Africa, walking long distances. And, I felt real guilty, in my Toyota Land Cruiser, or, well, not going to lie, I didn't have a Toyota Land Cruiser. I had something like an Isuzu Trooper or something much cheaper than a Toyota Land Cruiser. And a lot less comfortable or reliable. In fact, I better not give you the wrong impression. Like, I had to get out and do many sort of in the field fixes. And I had to even literally get sticks and twigs when we're going above 60 miles an hour on the sort of highway or roads, to try and get the seal of the door to stay in. It's just so we'd hear each other, right, when we're talking. To try and get the seal to stick on the door is very annoying. So I wasn't in Toyota Land Cruisers. It was far from Toyota Land Cruisers I was raised. It's more like Isuzu Troopers. And I thought they were slow. I couldn't believe this thing, it was a turbo diesel, but I couldn't feel any turbo torque on it at all. But then I drove one that didn't even have a turbo, and by God, it introduced me to a new level of slow, a new level of weak. I think it probably had something like 70 horsepower. That's what it felt like anyway. Right, I better sort of wrap it up because I'm that's basically kind of where it feels like I'm reaching the end of yet another tangent. Um, but I'll just look at the last few comments here anyway. Carl says this level of incompetence is happening at all levels now. Oh yeah, and just sorry, I went off on a tangent there, and I didn't forget my first thought. What I meant to say was I used to feel really guilty just being in a vehicle, and these women in long lines would travel from, I guess, like some wherever they were working. Doesn't wasn't necessarily in a field, but maybe, and then on back to their village at the end of the night, and I'd see them walking up this long road. Maybe it was a mile, maybe it was more, but it was no bother to them. But I did look out the window and kind of feel like a decadent Westerner. Like, how dare I? So I'm going to tell you, still lots of guilt in me. But I have learned that very few people, if I was walking that mile up the road, if the roles were reversed, I've since learned, and unfortunately this is the way it is, they're not going to look at me and go, I feel really sorry for him. I wonder if I can help him in some way. Um, so yeah, I thought I saw something else popping up there, but it didn't. Anyway, um, A says it's so open. At least in Aussie, they wear a suit and try to hide it. I think maybe you're talking about like sort of basically jobs programs and levels of incompetence and that kind of thing. Um, Carl says bingo. Right. I'll just finish off this thing about Nelson Mandela being a Xhosa. So Mandela was born into the Tembu royal family, and I've heard of a lot of people are called Tembi and Tembu and this kind of thing, so it must be after that. So he was born into royalty. He was born into the Tembu royal family in Mvezo, South Africa. He studied law at the University of Fort Hare. Now, I won't get into it now, but Fort Hare, anyway, is a town so named after another sort of British soldier kind of a guy. But not just a regular soldier, landed gentry type of fella. Carl is saying bingo with regard to lack of empathy. So look, straight away, things are not like I think that would be a surprise to most ordinary people. They say, "What? I thought he was just born a poor boy." Like Elvis would have sung about. What was that song? In the ghetto, in Soweto. Well, he wasn't born in the ghetto in Soweto. He was, fair enough, an illegitimate child, one of the king's many children that he sired by one of his concubines. And there were many different African kings, and still are, going around the place. So, colonization did not get rid of these royal lineages. And who among us just get to study law? And how would he get to study law in a place called Fort Hare, which is in not just in South Africa, but in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, during and under this terribly oppressive regime called apartheid? Doesn't that seem very silly of these oppressors to send him to law school? So, as A there says, he was one. Sorry, I'm laughing at Carl. I better read A's first. A says, it's one big club. And Carl Gustav says, he was Kang's. He certainly was. He was the illegitimate heir to the throne. So he studied law at the University of Fort Hare and the University of Witwatersrand. So, look, I don't think you need to speak Afrikaans. I'm going to translate that as White Waters Rand or Bank. We'll maybe revisit that at some point. Before working as a lawyer in Johannesburg. There, he became involved in anti-colonial and African nationalist politics, joining the ANC in 1943 and co-founding its Youth League in 1944. Isn't it amazing that he was able to do all this under this horrifically oppressive regime? After the National Party's white-only government established apartheid, a system of racial segregation that privileged whites, Mandela and the ANC committed themselves to its overthrow. What a noble cause. He was appointed president of the ANC's Transvaal branch. Well, that's sort of a region up there, and there was at one point a nation called the Transvaal Republic. I forget how long it lasted for, but even if it wasn't legally recognized by all the nations of the world, it was a de facto country, more or less, at some point for Afrikaners. And I'll have to look into it for next time. But I think the Transvaal, while still thought of as a region, might be now called something like the Gauteng province, and the maybe part of it is the KwaZulu Natal or something like that. Maybe there's some other province. Of course, they're renaming things now, but it's along those lines anyway. Um, so he committed himself to the overthrow of apartheid, and he was appointed president of the ANC's Transvaal branch, rising to prominence for his involvement in the 1952 Defiance Campaign. I'll just hover over what that says there. And the Defiance Campaign against unjust laws was presented by the African National Congress at a conference held in Bloemfontein, South Africa, in December 1951. As far as I remember, Bloemfontein is one of the capitals of South Africa still, perhaps the administrative capital nominatively. But Johannesburg is its financial capital for sure, and um, there would be at least a presence of government there as well. But Bloemfontein, at one point anyway, was more important maybe than it is now. South Africa in December 1951, the campaign had roots in events leading up to the conference, the demonstrations taking place in 1952. And I'm going to read on a little bit because I see there's an interesting picture of Mandela, and it looks like it's got, yes, Cyrillic script. I can't put it on screen just now, and I'll have it for the next time. But it's Mandela as a younger man, looking very defiant, with a beard on him as well, and a grimace. And it's got Russian writing saying Nelson Mandela underneath it. And it's commemorating him in 1988 from USSR. But just getting back to Nelson Mandela here again, there's so many things I could go off on a tangent on anyway. But after the 1952 Defiance Campaign, which is something, by the way, that all of us people, we feel that our governments are being oppressive, then if they think that it's nice and noble pursuit to do that, to defy your government, maybe we could take a leaf out of his book. And also the 1955 Congress of the People. He was repeatedly arrested for seditious activities, which is maybe there's a legal variance in how it differs from treason, but it's certainly getting there anyway, for seditious activities, and was unsuccessfully prosecuted in the 1956 treason trial. Imagine that, under the total privilege of white people and this terribly oppressive apartheid system that they had in South Africa, they were unsuccessful in their attempts to prosecute him in their own courts. Amazing, isn't it? It's almost as if there was a hidden hand helping him. Although initially committed to non-violent protest in association with the SACP, that's the South African Communist Party. Sorry, I skipped a line. Influenced by Marxism, he secretly joined the banned South African Communist Party. Although initially committed to non-violent protest in association with the SACP, he co-founded the militant, and let's see if I can pronounce this, Umkhonto. Full name, Umkhonto Sizwe, was the parliamentary wing of the African National Congress, and was founded by Nelson Mandela in the wake of the Sharpeville massacre. Its mission was to fight against the South African government. So, like, that's definitely you could call it a paramilitary or terrorist organization, because the group was also involved in foreign conflicts. So that's the Umkhonto Sizwe in 1961, and led a sabotage campaign against the apartheid government. Now, sabotage wasn't just political, it was terroristic or physical. And I'll just read out a small definition that Wikipedia has here. Sabotage is a deliberate action aimed at weakening a polity, government, effort, or organization through subversion, obstruction, demoralization, destabilization, division, disruption, or destruction. I think that's a very useful definition so that we can understand what happened to our nations. Not only were they physically destructed, but they were destabilized, demoralized, and there was a concerted, deliberate action aimed at weakening the people. That's the polity. And destabilization, disruption, and subversion is in there as well. Saboteurs typically try to conceal their identities. Reminds me of by deception we shall do war. Of course they conceal, they hide. They are clandestine. They deceive us. Amazing, isn't it? So we really could learn a lot of parallels. We talked earlier on about parallels that might become apparent between Donald Trump if he's sent to jail and then becomes president again, and the story of Nelson Mandela. So history certainly can rhyme, even if it doesn't exactly repeat. So this Mkhonto Wesizwe in 1961 led the sabotage campaign against the apartheid government. In other words, the legitimate government of South Africa as it was at the time. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. He was arrested and imprisoned in 1962, and following the Rivonia trial, that was a trial that took place in apartheid-era South Africa between 9th of October 1963 and 12th of June 1964, after a group of anti-apartheid activists were arrested in Lily Sleef Farm in Rivonia. The farm had been the secret location for meetings of the Mkhonto Wesizwe, the MK. So he was sentenced to life imprisonment for conspiring to overthrow the state. I think, again, we'll have to find out why they didn't execute him for conspiring to overthrow the state. It seems, in retrospect, for those people at the time, to have been a gross error. I wonder, was there such a thing as capital punishment for the crime of attempting to overthrow the state or conspiring to do so? Sedition. So I think I'll read just two more paragraphs and then we'll finish up here. So A then says about Nelson Mandela's education. He says, well, he got a better education than I got. Yeah. And he says, make it make sense. Well, maybe together. I mean, I'm not claiming, by the way, that I know the end of this story. So at some point, maybe we'll all learn together how it is that all of this happened. And it'll make more sense than I hope with regard to understanding where we are now with our current history and political climate in our own countries. Carl Gustav says, is that next to the Wu-Tang province? Yeah. I do enjoy learning what the new names and old names are for that. I find it interesting. And again, just like I like looking at Wikipedia, I think it benefits us to read what they say and what they do, and examine it all. So A says, Churchill, funny enough, do you know what's confusing me sometimes is I read a Churchill betrayed, oh no, and go, oh no, that's A is saying, not a Churchill, but the Churchill, betrayed England to Holland's William on behalf of the Hand. Yeah, I won't get into it now, but I think I've said it before, but I mean, Churchill was an absolute traitor to England, and people think he was a hero. Maybe I've written that, but I haven't said it, but we'll get into it another time. Churchill was an absolute traitor. He was a coward and engaged in provable skullduggery. And I won't say his name there, but I see it now when I just scan down, all right. Carl says, David has an excellent presentation on Churchill. He does. That it was banned in all of Europe. You can't see it in BitChute. That's why I just don't bother using BitChute anymore. But I've uploaded it to Odyssey, and I have sort of re-encoded it a little bit so that maybe it would fly now if somebody would put it on BitChute, but I've put it on Odyssey anyway. And it's fascinating, and it's a kind of dissertation or speech or lecture, or what would you call it, presentation, I suppose, that David gives, which there's so much information in it that it for me, I'll speak for myself, it necessitated me re-listening to it several times and coming back to it another time and a few other times just to sort of say, did I really hear what I thought that I heard, you know? And he speaks in such a gentlemanly way that he doesn't necessarily always spell it out for you. He says it in a very pleasant, jovial way, and you have to really kind of go, wait a minute, this isn't funny at all. I'd better, in my own mind, get a very concrete idea of what he's saying and all the implications of what he's saying, you know? Um, and he says, I own those books, out of print since 1987 here, right? He who dare not say his name, it'll get flagged. I saw that and I kind of thought, yeah, you're probably right. Um, but his ancestor, Churchill, also betrayed England against William the Orange, or Conqueror. Oh, I see. Well, I got the impression that Winston's father was also basically controlled by the same moneybags people, financial interests, global financial interests. But if you're telling me that Churchill had a ancestor going back to William of Orange or William the Conqueror, and is that the same guy as they call William the Silent? I think it is, but I could be wrong. Um, which often, if it is the same guy or if it isn't, I'm always getting confused, and that confuses me. But anyway, if you're telling me he had an ancestor, uh, also called Churchill, around that time, I better. Well, you can maybe if you can tell me what to look up to point myself to finding that out, I'm going to have to educate myself on that. Anyway, Carl is saying with regard to Mr. David, he's a delight to listen to, absolute delight. He is the quintessential affable, genial Englishman who is as genial and pleasant whether he's speaking to English people in English or to Germans and Germans. He is just such a pleasant person. And that's the kind of person who they point at and say, oh, he's the worst man in the world. Which to me, if they pointed that and called that evil, it reminds me of a quote from the Bible, which I'm going to pull up now. Something along the lines of, woe to them who would point at evil. Sorry, who would point at evil and call it good, or vice versa. Um, the phrase "woe to them who would point at evil and call it good" is a biblical warning against moral relativism. The concept is rooted in Isaiah 5:20, which states, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." Well, this is why, regardless of whether I'm a member or not, and I'm not, although I was brought up in the Catholic Church and culture, that is dead now anyway. Anyone who's still a member of the Catholic Church doesn't realize that, or doesn't want to realize it. But regardless, I had already, since the time I was a young child, said I want nothing to do with them. But that doesn't mean that there isn't great wisdom in the Bible. They really appreciate being now these days, particularly. I see now why I was told don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because those same kind of people who would point at Mr. David and say he is a bad man, he represents the worst of humanity, then that tells me exactly who we're dealing with. Now, I am aware that a lot of people say that Mr. David recanted or distanced himself from some of the things that he said in his later years. I don't know about that. I'm going to have to find out exactly what they're talking about, but my instinct says that I would forgive him on the basis of the body of his life's work and the contribution that he made. And I know that well, as far as I know, he's still alive, but very sick still. So I think he's the kind of person who I'd be able to extend some sympathies towards, if towards the end of his life, if he's in his 90s, that the fight might have left him. If he might have felt like, look, it's up to other people now, that he had no more fight left in him. Maybe that's my guess as to what things are. Now, sorry, I realize I've left up something on the screen there that has nothing to do with anything for a long time. I didn't mean to do that. What I should probably have done instead. Let's put that there. I'll leave that there until next time, right? And we'll pick it up from that point. Um, A says, I reckon he fled before the battle, and Edward lost. I'm of royalists to House of Tudor on my English side, I say. Okay, now I'm just gonna finish off a couple of paragraphs here on Nelson Mandela, and then we'll have a point to pick it up next time, right? A good point, right? Um, it'll be the early life we pick it up from. So Mandela served 27 years in prison, split between Robben Island, Pollsmoor Prison, and Victor Verster Prison. Amid growing domestic and international pressure and fears of racial civil war, President F.W. de Klerk released him in 1990. Now, I can't say that I remember much, and I just remember the name being read out, of course, when I was a kid. But I don't know much about him still, but I think I remember hearing or learning from the fellow that I recommend, Jan Lamprecht, on History Reviewed, that F.W. de Klerk was a progressive, as you might imagine, because he was part of the handover government. But he goes a bit further than that. It wasn't just a progressive, you know. Now, he's not saying he was an out-and-out one of them, but he was saying he was basically controlled by them, you know. So, F.W. de Klerk released Mandela from prison in 1990. Mandela and de Klerk led efforts to negotiate an end to apartheid, which resulted in the 1994 multiracial general election, in which Mandela led the ANC to victory and became president, leading a broad coalition government. I'm just hovering over that to see what it says on Wikipedia about that. He took the oath as President of South Africa on 10th of May 1994 and announced a government of national unity. On 11th of May 1994, the cabinet included members of Mandela's African National Congress, the National Party, and the Inkatha Freedom Party. So that was one of the political groups that I remember thinking of when they sort of said, look, we all have to be one black Pan-African party. So what they mean by unity is no fighting between the Inkathas, the Zulus, the Xhosas, and whoever else, you know. So, a broad coalition government which promulgated a new constitution. Mandela emphasized reconciliation between the country's racial groups and created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC. It was a court-like restorative justice body assembled in South Africa in 1996 after the end of apartheid, authorised by Nelson Mandela and chaired by, remember, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The commission invited witnesses who were identified as victims of gross human rights abuses. So it sounds like, you know, the J'accuse thing, and all these people who felt they'd been wronged by the previous government got to now become the accusers. Which reminds me of, again, the end of World War II in a way. And isn't it very easy to be magnanimous and create these very euphemistic sounding things called truth and reconciliation? Well, one might ask these days, of course, whose truth? And what exactly does reconciliation entail? And isn't it very easy to bring peace if you hold the keys to the kingdom and all the weapons, you know? So I wonder how objective they would have been. But again, maybe next week we can look into that. Maybe I'm wrong to suspect any possible sort of non-impartiality or retribution might have been going on instead of just reconciliation in this restorative justice process. So, created this Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate past human rights abuses. Economically, his administration retained its predecessor's liberal framework, despite his own socialist beliefs. Also introducing measures to encourage land reform. Again, like land reform, it's a little term that encompasses, and I remember, you know, when I was there, they were all chanting, land expropriation without compensation. And of course, they use these phrases, so everyone kind of goes, oh, yeah, no problem, that sounds great, sounds all nice and legal. Well, expropriation is a nice and legal word for taking by force, or theft. And without compensation means, and we're not going to pay you for it. We're not going to compensate for your loss. You lose. Goodbye, sir. You get nothing. That's what expropriation without compensation means, which is part of land reform, or what land reform before too long turned into. And also to combat poverty. Well, I think I did. I did do a live stream before where I showed you what their efforts of combating poverty achieved. And we'll get into that next week. And expanded healthcare and services. Internationally, Mandela acted as a mediator in the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing trial. Okay, yeah, that was, I think, the Lockerbie thing. Where... Right, won't get into it now, but anyway, it was supposed terrorism. Who knows what the real truth is? Libya might have been involved in that as well, or so they said. Served as a Secretary General of the Non-Aligned Movement from 1998 to 1999. He declined a second presidential term and was succeeded by his deputy, Thabo Mbeki. Mandela became an elder statesman and focused on combating poverty and HIV/AIDS throughout the charitable Nelson Mandela Foundation. A bit like Bill Gates, you know. He decided not to be, running Microsoft anymore. He went on to be someone who just combated these terrible diseases for us through his charitable foundation. Mandela was a controversial figure for much of his life, although critics on the critics, I'm so used to hearing it being said, just critics on the right denounced him as a communist terrorist. Well, I don't think that's untrue, because I don't think that he denied ever being a communist. Anyway, we'll get into that next week, as I say. Last paragraph here. And those on the far left deemed him too eager to negotiate and reconcile with apartheid supporters. He gained international acclaim for his activism. Well, of course, he was very politically correct. Everyone, even I remember when the Spice Girls met him. I mean, talk about a contrived meeting. And there was something very demeaning to the whole world about that as well. Like, these popstrel minxes who wear miniskirts made out of the British flag. The one thing that used to symbolise the British Empire. Little miniskirt, and she's on her platform high heels meeting Nelson Mandela, saying, "Oh, he's just my hero, I really fancy him," or whatever, Just so embarrassing all around. Cringing with embarrassment. So globally regarded as an icon of democracy, and we all know how lovely that turned out, and social justice. Music to our ears, He received more than 250 honours, including the Nobel Peace Prize. He is held in deep respect within South Africa, where he is often referred to by his Thembu clan name, Madiba, and described as the father of the nation. So that's kind of as far as I actually expected to get. And I'll leave it until next week now to continue on from that point. And I might have to do a little bit of updates on the Mandela effect, and then we'll get into his early life. So if anybody has updates like t-shirts or, if anybody finds a Fruit of the Loom t-shirt and they can send in a photograph to me. By the way, if you want to, my email address is send in to the studio. All right. My email address is eternalextrapolations@gmail.com. Or you can figure out some way of trying to let me know anyway on YouTube. I've only just recently joined Twitter, but I haven't posted anything yet. And I think I'm only following one person. So anyway, yeah, we'll figure it out. There was a couple of other Mandela effect stuff there. Oh yes, the Jaws thing. If anyone would find video of her with the train track braces for her teeth, of course people would say you could easily deepfake that now, yeah. But I would be interested anyway if somebody would say it. And then there was a couple of other interesting ones there that were mentioned. But anyway, that'll lead us into the early life of Nelson Mandela next week. Now, I'll read a couple of the last comments here, so get them in. I know there's something like a 20 to 30 second delay on this sort of normal version if I don't try to choose. There's an option for short latency or something like that, or instant or reduced delay but I'm not sure if that would mess things up in some other way. So I might leave it as just standard. Won't change that option. So anyway, 30-second delay. That was me delaying there by about 30 seconds to wait to see if a few more comments come in, and I'll read them out now. So yeah, what we're looking at there is what I perceive to be, and I was there in that shopping center or shopping mall, I should say, and it is, just like those father of the nation, communist, Stalinist, Lenin type statues, Now, fair enough. He's been all jovial there in his trademark tunic and all this kind of thing, but it's completely workers of the nation type stuff, absolutely inspired by the communist tropes there in not a trope, the motif of the great father of the fatherland of Mother Russia or whatever, Lenin, Stalin, not so much Trotsky, or other people, particularly in communist places where there's a great benevolent dictator who everyone must pretend is the father of the nation. So I was told, don't go up there on my own because I'm only going to get, enriched, that kind of way. But I think they just thought I think they thought that I was a lot more naive than I was. And there's no easy way really to explain to people no, I know what's up. And I can take it. No, listen, you can't, I'm not a tough guy. But I mean, you obviously keep your wits about you. Maybe that's not always going to save you. But I was just told, no, you don't understand. No, I do understand. I think you'll find I totally understand, But, because I was getting mighty tired of just staying wherever everybody told me was safe, That's in Johannesburg, by the way. And it's in a nice area in Johannesburg called Sandtown or Santon. Santon is probably how you say it, So, but I didn't like to see that kind of thing there. It gave me bad vibes. We all have been, oh, he's so happy, everything's so lovely. Well, everything isn't so lovely, And I probably do have another picture over there. Just while I'm here, just while I'm on it. Oh, yeah. So there we are, right? So people, and she could be South African, she could be a tourist from America or Europe. People think it's a great gas, And the funny thing is, I didn't see that many. It looks like you'd be forgiven for thinking that there's a lot of just white people sitting around there. It's not. That's kind of unusual. But oh, do you know where that is? That's in Washington D.C. So there he is again, the fist in the air, the communist fist in the air, or the feminist fist in the air. It's basically malcontents of the world unite. That's in the South African embassy in Washington D.C. So I thought I had some other photographs, but you get the idea anyway. And yeah, I liked going up there because at least I could be out in the courtyard there, a bit of fresh air. Because I worked there in Johannesburg for a while, and I was just after a few months, I just could not stand basically being a prisoner in a gilded cage, yeah, but just going between, the confines of where I was staying and wherever I was working, Anyway, last few comments. Aces, they would break the nails. Oh, right. Sorry, no, I've got to go back. About $300 worth of bronze right in the open. That's what prompted me to say I better put that up there. Worked great in Zimbabwe and Rhodesia. Exactly. And everybody in South Africa knows that that's what's going to happen to them or is happening to them in South Africa. And I knew a lot of people in South Africa, well, a few people who had come from Rhodesia to South Africa. And then other people who had gone also into South Africa and then gone to the Western Cape. So basically, it's the same thing. People just keep going, but never sort of saying, now I'm going to turn and sort of defend where I was born and grew up. No. Or hold my ground is the phrase I was looking for. So about 300 dollars worth of bronze right now. But yeah, if they would decommission it, um, like the copper, but bronze is a bit tougher than the copper, isn't it? Uh, A says I worked with an old Cellus Scout. I'm not sure if I don't think I know what Cellus Scout is. Selous. Mad lads, tough as nails. They tough as nails. They would break the nails. He says free Katanga, rip to Shambe. Uh, Vingo says I love David's reply to the question of his personal opinion on Big H. He said that's a bit like asking about my opinion of Jesus Christ. Well, look, I'll say this. I don't know if this is. I'll say this because I thought it was just very obvious, right? But about the killing of Tsar Nicholas II and his family, to me, that is a retelling or recapitulation, like a rehappening of the Christ killing story. And as far as well, who do we say, the Big H? Yeah, I see that as a Christ killing as well. It's the same scripts being played out or history rhyming. Well, and I would say that that's pretty on topic, actually, and good to see you back, Fingal. Carl says, maybe you could put the comments on screen. We can determine the time difference as well as what's being censored as well. Well, actually, Carl, the thing is, I have an idea how I could do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it and set it up beforehand next time, right? I'm in OBS and it's different to StreamYard. It's a standalone app, and there's some advantages. One being I can do my real-time local recording of this, so that no matter what happens on YouTube, I have my own copy, which I really like. And I can present things in a kind of an easier way, like for photographs and playing videos. StreamYard has its advantages as well. It makes things. It basically is a bit simpler to use. But StreamYard is what allows you to put comments really easily up on screen. I have an idea of how I might be able to do that. Just share the comment window. I think I can do that on OBS next week. So I'll do that next week. So sorry about that. That's kind of one of the drawbacks of this particular stream here. Anyway, Carl says, yeah, so we can determine the time difference as well as what's been censored. Yeah, exactly. Now, I've pretty much read out everything there, but you're right. Like, you'd know which David I'm talking about. If anybody didn't, might be better that I don't. Carl says, if anyone's curious enough and they still don't know, just check out my Odyssey. He says, you'd be amazed how many innocuous comments are shadowed if you compare two devices. Ah, yes. Yeah, well, there is that. There is that. And A says, I would go clubbing, drive all hours, sleep in a car in the Cape Town, or in the Cape in 2004. Wow. Look, whatever is wrong with you, and I'm guessing you have some kind of back pain or that kind of thing. I hope, I pray to God that you will get some relief and maybe even get fixed. And then you can live whatever part of your life that you want to do and do the things you want to do before it's over. And I wish the same of all of us, for me too, Vingul says, I often switch to my other account just to check if certain comms got through, right? And A says, I've been in some really sketchy situations, but they were always so surprised I got away. Well, look, I mean, I think the attitude that I had and have had for a while, and I recommend it to people, is don't do anything reckless, but at the same time, don't prevent yourself from living your life and going places and doing things because of a fear that you might get injured or worse, you could, the way I see it is, it's not, of course, don't be reckless, but if the way fate works, and fate is often usually ironic, that if you would try to stay to your own hometown because you're too afraid if you went somewhere else that you might get mugged or whatever, then you can be sure that fate would have an ironic twist of fate where you'd end up, the very thing you were trying to avoid happened to you on your own doorstep, literally and figuratively, or yeah. But equally, of course, don't become one of those people who just thinks everybody's lovely, and you just have to find a way to reach out and show them you're human and this kind of thing. I think we all know what we're getting at. Like those stupid tourists who go around the place and say, "Oh, we went biking through Morocco, and we just want to we did it to try and prove to everyone how Moroccans are just lovely, or whoever, or the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo are lovely." Well, I deliberately avoided, and so did South Africans that I was with, avoided going through the territory, even a small little sort of panhandle territory of the Democratic Republic of Congo, because, Zaire, as it was called at one point, because we were just told, look, you just don't want to be taking extra risks that you don't have to. So I would basically defer to local knowledge if enough people told me that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I would balance that with, I refuse to basically live a life of a pet rabbit in a cage, pampered and never getting to see or do anything or live life, because part of living life is to feel danger. Anyway, uh, and yeah, A sort of knows what I'm talking about. He says, I'd feel safer in South Africa than most parts of the USA. And I would say the same about London, Paris, Frankfurt. Um, I tell you what, uh, so somewhere like Marseille in the south of France sounds very salubrious, but um, yeah, I would, I know Cape Town better, and I know where to go and where not to go. I would definitely take my chances far better in Cape Town than in Marseille in the south of France, or Frankfurt in Germany. You know, um, so I said I was going to finish up. I'm going to finish it up. I'm going to say read out the last couple now and stop delaying and say thanks everyone for listening. Uh, A says, I've been in some really sketchy situations, but they were always so surprised I got away. No fixing me, but it could be worse. Sorry to hear that, eh? I know a lot of people probably say sorry to hear that, but anyway. Well, at least I hope that your pain can be diminished in some way. Carl says, the universe does seem to have a sense of humour sometimes. Oh yes, the God himself could not sink this ship moment. And Vingol says, I believe in cosmic humour, cosmic jokes. Yeah, the universe does seem to have a sort of a dark sense of humour, an ironic sense of humour. And A says, Mum's a Congolese, grandma Moroccan. Really? I take it you're joking, but if you're not, well, I won't hold it against you. And Vingol says, cheers, lads. Okay, I'll leave it at that. One last comment here. Carl says, I don't consider myself to be superstitious, but I do find that pride cometh before the fall. Often holds true. Yeah, look, a balance between legitimate confidence and humility, and also being brave and not being stupid. All these kind of things. I find that's one of the universe's very obvious, self-evident laws. There must be a balance in all things, or between all things. All right, cheers, A, and cheers, Carl. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you listening. And I will talk to you, hopefully, roughly in the next week, or maybe even tomorrow if I can set up something else for something totally different. But hopefully before too long, I'll talk to you again. And I appreciate all your really helpful comments and just having you here for the kind of virtual company. Cheers for now. Until next.